Chapter 1641. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's mouth twitched. His hand, which was holding the wine cup, trembled slightly. "Old man, you should stop talking. I've been here for so long, and I've watched you get struck by lightning every day. My balls hurt for you." "Who's the old man? Who's the old man?" The young man glared at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal. "You brat, don't think that you can call me an old man just because you're 1 or 2 years younger than me. When I get out, I'm going to marry 8 to 10 young wives. Don't call me that, you're making me sound old." "Hee, what are you two talking about? You're having a good time." A voice interrupted their conversation. Look at you. It's all because you're so annoying over there that you've attracted that woman." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal poured himself a cup of wine leisurely and glanced at the young man hanging on the wall. "To be honest, at your age, you'd better not go out and harm other young ladies. You should just stay in the punishment realm obediently." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal smirked. He looked up and saw a woman with a large peony hairpin and red silk walking in lightly. She held a silk handkerchief in front of her face. She took a few steps forward shyly and slowly put down the silk handkerchief that covered her face. She revealed a face that was comparable to a monkey's butt. Her cheeks were red and her eyes were full of tenderness. She twisted her body and winked at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal. The wine cup in the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's hand almost rolled off the bed that he was frightened by this woman. "You! Brother Magician, do my clothes look better than mine?" The peony walked half a circle around the bed and gently swayed her red silk dress. She raised her eyebrows and winked at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal again. "Ha ha 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 ha." The young man hanging on the wall laughed wildly. "Peony Fairy, your face is now like a monkey's butt. Ha ha ha, do you think it looks good or not?" "Shut up, Dao Wuji. I'm not talking to you." The Peony Fairy turned her hand, and a small hammer appeared in her hand. There was a trace of lightning power on it. The young man named Everlasting Blade didn't seem to care at all. He curled his lips and was forced to say something against his will. "In truth, peonies and peach blossoms are a perfect match." The Peony Fairy giggled. "Shut up." A certain Peach Blossom's handsome face immediately darkened, and he glared angrily at the youth. Saber Wuji pursed his lips and closed his mouth unconcernedly. Since he failed to break through the tower 10 years ago, he was trapped in the 13th level of the punishment realm by the Peony Fairy with the spirit-locking rope. All these years, he had been so aggrieved. Now, any random junior could order him around. Thinking back to the days when he was on Cun Planet, he lived a life of luxury and had more than 10 wives. Compared to now, sigh. Brother Jian-Chen. The Peony Fairy wriggled her body and said, "Why don't you stay with me in this punishment realm?" Jian-Chen shuddered and hurriedly shook his head like a rattledrum. No, of course not. Just looking at this woman for an extra second was enough to sting his eyes, let alone having him stay here and face her for the rest of his life. Stop joking. Jian-Chen suddenly stood up and kicked over the fruit basket on the bed. Come. The Peony Fairy's eyes lit up. Ah, I'm coming. Chapter 1642. Therefore, Yuan Shichen did not hesitate to kick the Peony Fairy, who rushed forward happily. This kick carried a fierce momentum and went straight to the Peony Fairy's chest. The Peony Fairy was shocked and hurriedly jumped, dodging Yuan Shichen's sudden kick. Wow! The Peony Fairy exclaimed, frowning a pair of beautiful eyebrows, and cried discontentedly, "Yuan Shichen, you actually recovered." In just a few days, this man had recovered 70% of his cultivation. It should be known that in this punishment zone, the strength of the challenger was suppressed greatly. Although it seemed that Yuan Shichen's cultivation was about the same as hers, in fact, Yuan Shichen's cultivation was at least half suppressed by the punishment tower. Moreover, this was only the 13th floor. Yuan Shichen would continue to challenge the 14th and 15th floors, and the consumption of sacred power would only increase. Moreover, under the suppression of the punishment tower, the recovery of sacred power consumed would be 10 times slower than usual. Therefore, some people were forced to stay on the first floor for a few years, or even more than 10 years, because every time after a challenge failed, the recovery period would be very slow. For example, the saber fool in front of her. From 10 years ago to now, he might have challenged no less than 100 times. Yuan Shichen, this guy, from entering the tower until now, only a month's time, but directly from the first floor to the 13th floor. These 2 days, he was stuck on the 13th floor with the Peony Fairy. But the Peony Fairy had a strange feeling in her heart. She always felt that in these 2 or 3 days, the man in front of her was afraid that she would not be able to keep him. Alas, such a good-looking man, why didn't he want to be with her? She had been single for 100 years. This Yuan Shichen, he really did not know how to be tender to the fairer sex. If he was willing to stay here, then they would be husband and wife. Then in the future, the man and woman pair would guard the 13th floor together. Let's see who could escape from the hands of the husband and wife. Sister! Sister! Hearing this excited cry, the Peony Fairy's head could not help but swell. This cry was so crisp and sharp, needless to say, it must be her twin sister guarding the 12th floor, Ginkgo Fairy, who had come. Sister! Don't come over. The Peony Fairy stood in front of Yuan Shichen, stretched out her hands in front of Yuan Shichen, and pushed her sister, who jumped over. I tell you, brother-in-law can't be bullied. Big brother Ji Qin is the person that I, your sister, have taken a fancy to. Don't you dare snatch him from me. What's more, you weren't even able to keep him here for half a day. At the very least, I managed to keep him here for 7 days. I just made a mistake. Fairy Ginkgo almost drooled when she saw Hu Jinchen, that her elder sister, the Peony Fairy, saw her younger sister's stupid look and immediately reached out to cover her face. In fact, her younger sister, Fairy Ginkgo, was almost as strong as her. That was why one of them could guard the 12th floor and the other the 13th floor. The problem was that her sister, that pig head, was infatuated when she saw Ji Qin. Halfway through the fight, because of a close-range attack, the handsome man was right in front of her. That enlarged handsome face actually made her pig-like little sister faint. At that time, Ma Shichen looked at Fairy Ginkgo with a weird expression. After looking at her for a long while, she helplessly entered the passageway to the 13th floor. There were weirdos every year, and there were probably a lot of weirdos in the punishment realm. Chapter 1643. Although he had experienced it a long time ago, he was still troubled by those weirdos from the first floor to the 13th floor. Although there were weirdos when challenging the Tower of Punishment in the past, there were not many of them. In recent years, he felt that there were more and more weirdos in the Tower of Punishment. He wondered if it was because the old batch had been released, and the new batch had some flaws in their personalities, that he felt that the guards of the Tower of Punishment were the ones who made him feel the most helpless out of all the people he had challenged in the realm of punishment over the years. Sigh, how could he endure this? He wondered if his old friend from the 14th floor was still there. In the past, he had fought his way to the 14th floor, and after drinking a few cups with his old friend would open a back door and let him out. He wondered if he would be so lucky this year. Speechless, Ma Shichen turned his face away and swung his fan to cover half of his face. Peony, tell your sister to stop staring at me. That look in her eyes was as if she wanted to eat him. Peony Fairy coughed lightly and tugged at her sister's sleeves. Ginkgo, why did you come up here? Just now when you entered the door, you were still excitedly calling out for your sister. Why are your eyes all on your brother-in-law now? Who the hell is your brother-in-law? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was even more speechless. Hearing the pretty man's words, Ginkgo Fairy immediately smiled and returned to her senses. She giggled at Ma Shurchin and then turned to look at her sister, Peony Fairy, and said, Sister, I heard that there's an extremely powerful challenger coming down. I heard it from Sister Poisonous Spider on the 8th floor. Oh, that man is very handsome. Ginkgo Fairy looked as if she was about to drool. She tugged at Peony Fairy and said excitedly, I heard that this man took less than half a month to go from the 1st floor to the 11th floor. Ha ha ha, I think he's coming to challenge my 12th floor today. Just thinking about it makes me excited. Ginkgo Fairy clasped her hands together like a fangirl reaching out to her idol. I really want to see what that man looks like. Do you think he's willing to stay and be my husband? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal rolled his eyes. You two sisters can't think of anything else other than husband. Peony Fairy said expressionlessly, You'll see when you turn around. Ha! I said, turn around and you'll see him. The Peony Fairy was so angry that she slapped her younger sister's head. Are you a pig? She clearly knew that he was coming up. You even dared to come to my 13th floor. Aren't you going easy on him and allowing him to pass through the 12th level? The Ginkgo Fairy turned around in a daze. When she saw the figure of the man standing in front of the passage, her pink mouth immediately opened wide. Wow! The black-clothed young man at the door was elegant and graceful. His features were picturesque, and he was indescribably handsome. He just stood at the side of the door with an indifferent expression. His pair of phoenix eyes swept across the people on the 13th floor. The two women immediately felt as if they were electrocuted by his gaze. They were completely unable to move a finger. When Ji-Chin saw the man at the door, he couldn't help but laugh. Yo, you're here too. Limitless Blade, the young man who was hung on the wall by the spirit-binding rope, was also amused. Yo, kid, you actually managed to meet an old friend in a foreign land. Chapter 1644. How about we discuss something? Why don't you two think of a way to release me from this god-locking rope? With the three of us working together, killing these two women will be a matter of minutes. Bang! As soon as she finished speaking, the small thunder hammer in the Peony Fairy's hand immediately released a bolt of lightning, directly bombarding Dao Wuji's head. Fuck! A hole was about to be blown out of his head. Dao Wuji grimaced and glared at the Peony Fairy, can you be a bit lighter? In any case, I have lived on your floor for 10 years. Isn't it good to have a little tenant hobby? This guy's mouth was cheap, he was looking for a beating. Ji-Chin looked at Dao Wuji without the slightest sympathy, and laughed as she leaped forward. I have challenged the tower so many times, but this is the first time I have met someone who can challenge the tower together. I don't know what the Heavenly Dao is up to, but I always feel that there is a follow-up move waiting for them. Boss, how about us two brothers block these two women for you first? You go up first. A simple and honest voice came from outside the passage. Peony and Ginkgo both widened their eyes, looking in astonishment at the pair of brothers who walked into the 13th floor. The pair of brothers' sturdy bodies blocked the entrance, immediately blocking the passage. The tower-like man with dark skin looked very similar. They both had wide mouths and sword-like eyebrows, neat short black hair, and a red cloth band tied on each of their foreheads. You two. Aren't you the Luo brothers? Weren't these the Luo brothers who guarded the 10th floor of the tower? Ginkgo and Peony were both shocked. The Luo brothers actually called this man boss. The two turned to look at the expressionless man at the same time, unable to conceal a trace of astonishment in their eyes. This man subdued the Luo brothers. However, in front of the man, the words that Sister Ginkgo originally wanted to ask disappeared in an instant. Looking at that handsome face, Fairy Ginkgo immediately threw away her helmet and abandoned her armor. She took a step forward, and asked in an extremely strange and soft voice, "Little brother, do you lack a wife?" Ji-Chin on the side couldn't hold back her laughter, and burst out laughing. "He really doesn't lack a wife." Mo Lien turned her head and looked at Hu Jinchen with a trace of doubt in her eyes. He thought that it would be impossible for him to meet He-Chin in the Tower of Punishment. What was going on this time? The Heavenly Tao actually didn't set up a barrier to separate everyone who challenged the tower from each other. "Beauty, do you really not lack a wife?" Fairy Ginkgo asked with a look of disappointment. "Then are you willing to stay in our Tower of Punishment?" What answered her was Mo Lien abruptly flinging a flame at her. He-Chin laughed loudly. Suddenly, he threw a punch at his old rival, the Peony Fairy. "Peony, why don't we make a deal? How about you let us out of the tower? I'll let Mo Lien drink with you for free. It's more appropriate to stay behind and be the husband of the fort. You want to dismiss me, Peony, with just a few drinks? Do you think I'm as stupid as Ginkgo?" Peony's expression suddenly turned solemn. The small hammer in her left hand flashed, and a bolt of lightning pounced down, falling straight down on, hanging on the wall on Dao Wuji's body. Dao Wuji was caught off guard this time, and was immediately electrocuted to the point of ecstasy. He couldn't help but curse, "Don't you fucking have eyes? Who are you striking? What are you striking your grandpa for?" The small lightning hammer in Peony's hand suddenly grew half a meter in the wind. She reached out with her hand and rested the hammer on her shoulder. Chapter 1645. She flashed to the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's side and hammered his head. The Peony Fairy's lips curled into a wide smile. "Our cultivations are about the same, but in this Tower of Punishment, your cultivation is suppressed to the God realm. Do you think you can fight me for more than 100 moves if I get serious?" The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal smiled at her. He stretched out his slender fingers and waved them in front of her. A wooden vine suddenly whipped around the Peony Fairy's arm. "I asked you to stay with me, but you didn't want to. Now you're using a wooden vine to wrap around my arm." The Peony Fairy cast a coquettish glance at him. However, her face was now red, and it was quite an eyesore to look at. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal narrowed his eyes at her. With a flip of his hand, the Peony Fairy suddenly felt the ground beneath her feet sink. When she looked down again, the Peony Fairy could not help but be shocked. It turned out that countless vines had drilled out of the ground at some point in time and were tightly wrapped around her feet. "You?" The Peony Fairy struggled hard and realized that she could not break free from the binding power of the wooden vines. The vines on the ground wrapped around her limbs and gradually climbed up. In a short while, the Peony Fairy's entire body was tightly wrapped. It was as if she was wrapped in a wooden cocoon. Her entire body was lifted into the air and hung high on a wooden vine. "Don't waste your energy." Seeing that she was still struggling, the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal could not help but say coldly, "These little cuties of mine will continuously absorb the power in your body." As time passed, the wooden vines wrapped around the Peony Fairy would only become stronger and stronger. The Peony Fairy, on the other hand, would gradually weaken as the same power in her body was drained. After the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal temporarily fixed the Peony Fairy, he turned to look at Mo Lien on the other side. Mo Lien's speed of action was even faster. While the Peony Fairy was being hung up by Ji-Chin, the battle between Mo Lien and Ginkgo had already ended. It was laughable. Halfway through the battle, Ginkgo Fairy held her sword and stared blankly at Prince Mo's approaching figure. On the other side, Prince Mo, who never knew how to be gentle with women, naturally acted according to the situation. He decisively chopped down with his blade and knocked Fairy Ginkgo unconscious. Therefore, there was no suspense in this battle at all, because the opponent was a weirdo who only knew how to look at handsome men. Prince Mo walked forward with a cold expression. Dao Wuji, who was hanging on the wall, hurriedly called out to him, "Hey little brother, can you help me release this god-locking rope?" Mo Lian turned her head to look at him. The purple flame in her hand suddenly turned into 3 purple knives, which flew toward Dao Wuji's arm. Endless Blade broke out in a cold sweat at his actions. What kind of joke was this? If he was struck by this purple flame, how could his arm be preserved? Bang! Bang! The spirit-binding rope suddenly broke apart. There were still a few purple sparks of fire on it. With a few cracking sounds, the spirit-binding rope broke into pieces and fell to the ground. Dao Wuji let out a long breath, looking at the young man in front of him with a slightly complicated expression. Sighed, the new generation really excels the old. Hu Shichen alone was enough to deal a blow to him. Now, this young man was even more impressive. Looking back at the peony fairy, who was hanging in midair by the wooden vines, Dao Wuji grinned. Let's go to the 14th level, I'll make up for it tomorrow. I'll break it today. Chapter 1646. Put me down, put me down. The peony fairy, who had half of her strength absorbed by the wooden vines, was hanging in mid-air, shaking her delicate body desperately. She shouted angrily, Shichen, Shichen. Do you think it's appropriate for you to run away and leave me here? It's appropriate. The venerable peach blossom immortal blinked and nodded vigorously. He thought it was very appropriate. Could it be that he had masochistic tendencies? It was not easy to hang this noisy woman up, so how could he go up and let her go now? Stop joking. How could he, Shichen, do such a thing? Shichen, Shichen. Seeing that the man was about to run away without looking back, the peony fairy could not help but panic. Shichen. And that person. That little fellow. Stop right there. The Luo brothers on the 10th floor, what's wrong with you? The 2 brothers, who were as tall as iron towers, looked at each other and sympathetically at the peony fairy. Peony, we are friends. Let me give you a piece of advice. Don't look for trouble. Quickly get rid of them. The peony fairy was speechless. Shichen, do you think you can escape from the 17th floor of the Tower of Punishment just like this? Let me tell you. Even if you bring these 2 traitors, it's useless. The people upstairs are not the group of rookies downstairs. Besides, even if the brothers and sisters downstairs have been defeated by you once, if they join forces, you won't be able to handle them. After saying that, she added angrily, even if you add these 2 traitors, can the 5 of you deal with the many brothers and sisters downstairs? Dao Wuji immediately pulled out the saber at his waist and smashed it on the wall beside him. Shut up, you woman. I've been listening to you for 10 years. Why are you still so long-winded before we leave? Dao Wuji, you're itching for a beating. Be careful or I'll destroy you with heavenly lightning. Come on, come on. Dao Wuji swung the long saber in his hand smugly. If you have the guts, don't run. Wait here. The brothers downstairs will definitely come up soon. Forget it, peony. The Luo brothers speechlessly glanced at the peony fairy, who was wrapped in a wooden cocoon. Do you think the brothers downstairs are all idiots? Those who admit defeat all follow my big brother. Those who didn't submit are all dead now. What? The peony fairy was stupefied. What do you mean? Where are the poisonous spiders on the 8th floor? 8th floor. The Luo brothers rolled their eyes. The 8th floor has been razed to the ground. What venomous spiders? There's nothing left of venomous spiders. Poisonous spider was killed. The peony fairy was shocked. You two bastards. Venomous spider has been killed by someone. How can you be so indifferent? The Luo brothers looked at each other in confusion. Poisonous spider's mother isn't even our biological mother. What does her death have to do with us brothers? The peony fairy nodded and said, that's true. Everyone was speechless. Are you a fucking joker? I thought you were going to continue scolding me righteously, but who would have thought? He-chin, put me down. At most, I won't ask you to be my husband. The venerable peach blossom immortal sneered mockingly. You think you can suppress me with your skills? Okay. He-chin, haven't you been suppressed by me before? Didn't you rest for 7 days before you waited for an opportunity to counterattack? You suppressed me. Chapter 1647. Master Immortal, strange. Why does this conversation sound so unpleasant to the ear? He kept feeling that something was wrong. Especially when he noticed the strange look in Prince Mo's eyes, he couldn't help but glare at him. What are you looking at? Let's go. He-chin grumpily walked toward the passage on the 14th floor and asked, Mo Lien, since you are here, what about my little girl? Mo Lien glanced at him grumpily and turned to leave. What do you mean by your little girl? She is mine. Ha! He-chin, are you really not going to let me down? He-chin. He. Thawed. The peony fairy felt the wooden cocoon on her head loosen slightly, and she slid down. Because the wooden vines had absorbed more than half of her saint energy, the peony fairy felt that her head was heavy and her feet were light. She almost tripped and fell to the ground. When she looked up, she saw that they had entered the passage. The peony fairy couldn't help but snort and say sarcastically, the little Taisui on the 14th floor is not easy to deal with. You guys have to be careful. His earth spirit bonding technique has already reached the peak of perfection. Even I am not his opponent. Wuji Dao pursed his lips. Damn, this old woman is really a strange person. But without her advice, it is just a little Taisui. Do you think the 5 of us can't kill it? Mo Lien and He-chin both ignored this dunce. After they reached the 14th floor, they didn't feel anything wrong. In the middle of the empty floor, they could see the end of it. There was no one. Don't tell me that little Taisui is hiding after seeing that there are so many of us. Dao Wuji laughed heartily. Mo Lien, He-chin, and the Luo brothers all ignored him. Wuji Dao wanted to walk toward the center of the tower, but he found that he couldn't lift his feet. Looking down, he couldn't help but be shocked. My leg. My legs are gone. He-chin didn't want to talk to this idiot. What legs? Aren't your legs here? However, he was entangled by a layer of soft mud, and his legs sank into the thick layer of soft mud. As soon as they entered the 14th level, little Taisui launched an earth spirit attack at them. Yuan Shichin snorted, and an emerald green seedling suddenly drilled out of the soil. At first, it was just a thin and weak seedling, but then, as if it had eaten a growth stimulant, it began to sprout branches and leaves, and gradually grew stronger. Not long after, a towering tree grew in the center of the tower. Several branches of the big tree spread out and wrapped around the waists of He-chin, Mo Lien and the others. With just a light lift, the 5 of them were lifted up at the same time, and their feet left the shackles of the soil. Ha! Taste my stone rain. A childish voice suddenly came out from the corner. All of a sudden, everyone felt a dark cloud pressing down on them. When they looked up, they saw a round of boulders being released like a violent storm. Mo Lien, He-chin, the Luo brothers, and Wuji Dao all released their own defensive enchantments at the same time to block the stone rain. Wuji Dao used his holy power to protect his body, and he couldn't help but curse, "Holy fuck, where did this perverted brat come from? What kind of hero is he to hide his head and show his tail? Come out if you have the guts. Flaunting your seniority, go die." The childish voice suddenly sounded in Wuji Dao's ears. Wuji Dao only felt that the stone rain above his head was becoming denser and denser. Chapter 1648. In this round of attacks, the defensive barrier was clearly weakened by several points, causing his expression to change slightly. Break! After a child's voice, the dense stone rain fell on Dao Wuji one after another. Dao Wuji was caught off guard and took the full brunt of the stone rain. He immediately spat out a mouthful of blood, and the defensive barrier on his body was suddenly torn apart by the power of the little Tai Sui. His entire body was like a sparrow hawk that had its string cut. He was swept away by a surge of power and fell heavily to the ground. CK. The unlucky Dao Wuji spat out another mouthful of blood, and his aura suddenly withered. One had to know that this old guy was also a very unlucky person. He had been locked in this tower of punishment for at least 10 years. Ever since he reached the 13th floor, he was detained by the Peony Fairy, so he never knew that the little Tai Sui on the 14th floor was actually such a terrifying figure. Cough cough, cough. Dao Wuji was also a tough guy. Although he was beaten to the ground, his spirit did not collapse. Raising a thumb, Dao Wuji gestured toward an unknown corner. The guardian of the 14th floor is really powerful. This old man is convinced. If you're convinced, then get the hell out of here immediately. The child's voice carried a trace of incongruous coldness. And you two traitors, leave your lives here today. The rain of stones accumulated power in the air for a moment, then suddenly turned around and headed straight for the Luo brothers' heads. You're courting death. Mo Lien sneered and waved her hand, and an ink-colored lotus flower floated out with a snap of her fingers. It crashed into the stone rain, causing a violent tremor. Mo Lien pulled out the Raven Moon sword with her left hand, and a few sword shadows appeared in the air, directly tearing apart the stone rain above her head, and wantonly rampaging through it. He Shurchen looked up, and his eyes couldn't help but darken a little. Yet she saw Crown Prince Mo draw the word, death, in the rain of stones like a swimming dragon with his sword. The sword chi surged, expanded, and suddenly exploded again. The force of the shock wave once again threw the passerby, Dao Wuji, who was lying on the ground to watch the show. He rolled to the corner of the wall, and this time he really couldn't get up. Innocent. Dao Wuji wanted to cry tears of sympathy for himself. Every time the Almighty fought, the one who suffered was always a small fry like him. The stone rain dispersed, and the child's voice was silent for a while. Suddenly, he said coldly, "Boy, you're quite powerful. However, if you want to break through this level of mine, just this bit of ability is far from enough." The child's voice became cold again. As the voice fell, a small figure drilled out from the wall. A pair of cold silver eyes looked indifferently at the people on the floor, as if staring at a few dead people. "I am your little Tai Sui." Hu Shurchen was speechless. The child's lips were red and his teeth were white. He looked like a golden child. Perhaps it was because he had been locked in the pagoda for a long time, but his complexion was extremely pale and abnormal. The heavenly Tao is too shameless. It actually caught a child to be the guardian of the tower. Was there any justice in this world? What did this child do to him? The heavenly Tao was actually such a heavenly Tao. Sigh, what a disappointment. Little fellow, how many years have you been guarding the 14th floor by yourself? Why don't we go out together? Chapter 1649. Nonsense, the childlike voice rebuked angrily. Little Tai Sui's expression was cold, and his eyes were as cold as ice. He stared deeply at Ma Shurchin. Do you know how old I am? How dare you call me a little guy? Do you want to die? How old are you? Ma Shurchin asked curiously, by the way, do you know where the guardian of the 14th level, Dungeon, went? Oh, you're the boyfriend that Dungeon was willing to betray the heavenly Tao to protect, Ma Shurchin. Master Ma Shurchin, that's strange. Why does it feel like something's not right? Do you want to know where he is? Little Tai Sui suddenly smiled at Ma Shurchin. However, it was better not to smile like that. That fake smile that tugged at the corners of his mouth really made people shudder. Little Tai Sui suddenly flipped his hand, and a transparent earth-type cage appeared in his palm. Upon closer inspection, one could see a small, transparent figure inside the cage. It was like a little sparrow, and it was gripping the earthen pillar of the cage tightly as it cried out to Ma Shurchin with tears in its eyes, Ma Shurchin, save me, save me. Ma Shurchin's lips twitched involuntarily. Dungeon, how are you? Little Tai Sui destroyed my physical body, and he didn't even spare my divine sense. Wah! He said he was going to lock me up for 1,000 years. You're even going to make me sob. I can't even die. Wah! My dignity, my honor, everything that I had in the past has vanished along with the destruction of my physical body. The transparent figure in the earthen prison waved its arms and pounded its chest as it wailed and wailed. Mo Lian's face was expressionless. However, Ma Shurchin couldn't bear to look at it. When were you locked up? 2 years ago. The figure waved its arms and legs. Ma Shurchin, you have to save me. You don't know how malicious little Tai Sui is. This earthen prison is far from as peaceful as it appears to be. This earthen prison will launch an attack on my divine sense every other day. It's so scary, so scary, so scary. Let me out. I don't want to stay in this dark room anymore. Little Tai Sui didn't wait for Dunzong to finish complaining. He directly stuffed the dungeon into his sleeve. With a hint of coldness in his silver eyes, he indifferently stared at Shichin in front of him. You want to save him? Use your own life in exchange for it. Shurchin shook his head like a rattledrum and said firmly, no. Little Tai Sui's expression immediately became a little peculiar, and it looked at Ma Shurchin with disdain. Humans really are selfish things. Idiot, did you hear that? You have violated the heavenly Tao time and time again. The people released from the Tower of Punishment will not know how to be grateful. Little Tai Sui patted its left sleeve, as if it was reminding Dunzong in the cage. Instantly, there was no sound. Little Tai Sui thought that he was very disappointed, and the corners of its mouth involuntarily curled up into a mocking smile. Shurchin, since you've returned, you can stay in the realm of punishment forever. Hee hee. Ma Shurchin hurled several hundred wooden spikes at Little Tai Sui. Instantly, the wooden spikes flew toward Little Tai Sui in unison, forming a semicircle in front of him, almost completely enveloping his small body. Light of a firefly. Little Tai Sui muttered in a cold voice. Little Tai Sui didn't move at all. With just a light stomp of his foot, the wooden spikes that had formed a semicircle in front of him were all reduced to dust. I'm not done yet. Chapter 1650. Mo Lian's eyes flickered, and she finally looked at the little Tai Sui with a serious expression. This kid looks pretty strong. I'll take you on. Prince Mo's figure flickered, and he was already in front of the little Tai Sui. A wisp of black flames suddenly slid past the little Tai Sui's eyes, and the little Tai Sui's usually indifferent face couldn't help but be stunned. His body reacted faster than his brain, and he dodged the black flames with a twist of his body. The little Ticeway lowered his head and looked at the small, deep pit that had been blasted into the ground. His two delicate little eyebrows were knitted together. "It's actually a holy flame," the little Ticeway muttered to himself. He looked up with uncertainty and took a deep look at Emolien. "Who are you?" Prince Mo's lips curled into a mocking smile. "You only have the right to ask me if you can beat me." "Ha, how many years has it been since I've met such an arrogant brat? I'll meet you for a while." Before he could finish speaking, he saw that Crown Prince Mo had already moved, and clusters of black flames dashed toward him like shooting stars. The little Ticeway couldn't help but frown slightly. It seemed that he had bitten off a tough bone today. On the other side, in the hinterland of an area like the lava mountain range, Arbor came back after a round of cleaning. Among the 100 or so foxes, he only picked up a dozen or so crystal cores. This was because not all beasts had crystal cores in their heads. After running back, Arbor saw the little fatty lying flat on a rock. He couldn't help but find it a little funny. "Hey, get up, drink some water, eat something, and rest." Mata was holding a water bag in her hand. She looked at the fatty with a smile. "Fatty, didn't you bring a lot of water? Hurry up and take out a water bottle to drink. Look at your face. It's so red that it's a little abnormal." In the hinterland of the lava mountain range, in the scorching hot environment, it was as if a person had been thrown into a furnace and was constantly being roasted. If they couldn't replenish their water in time, the water in their body would be lost too quickly, and they definitely wouldn't be able to withstand it. "That won't do." The little fatty shook his head and licked his dry lips. "Although I brought a lot of water with me this time, but look at this place, the environment is so bad. God knows how many more days we'll have to spend here. If we drink all the water on the first day, what are we going to do for the next few days?" Mata nodded. "Yo, I didn't expect a little fatty like you to have such a sense of crisis." That was indeed the case. "Back then, when we were training here, the third day was the most difficult day." Mata looked as if he was reminiscing about the past and sighed. "At that time, we were in a state of almost no water and food. I don't even know how we managed to survive the next few days." When the little fatty heard this, he quickly sat up and asked, "Senior Brother Mata, what happened after that? How did you persevere?" Mata shrugged and said with a smile, "Yes, with willpower. Persevere with your own willpower. Sometimes, when we think we're reaching our limit, we can't help ourselves. Actually, we can still continue to persevere." Hearing this, Qi Xianxian scoffed, "Oh. In a state of no water and no food, you can still persevere for 3 to 4 days. It was still okay if there was no food, but in such a scorching environment, without water, it was really not a place for people to stay. If they really reached the point of no water, in such a furnace-like mountain, the consumption of their body would be even greater." Chapter 1651. Especially the last 2 days, it would be even more unbearable. How could the human body endure it then? How could one endure it? This was an impossible thing. Unless one's body was so tough that they had shed their mortal bones and entered the mystic skeleton stage. Otherwise, a normal person's body would not be able to endure such a test. This was not an ordinary environment where cultivators could go without food or water for 8 to 10 days. As long as they entered a sealed cultivation environment, they would be able to endure hunger. Now that they were in such a hot environment, the consumption of their physical strength would increase exponentially. Mata could not help but smile, and winked at Qi Xianxian. All right. Originally, I wanted to show off in front of you all, but unexpectedly, you saw through me. Actually, at that time, I secretly hid a small flask of water. It was because of that small flask of water that I managed to endure until the end. Every time I looked at that small flask of water, it was as if I was hinting to myself that I had already drunk the water, I had already drunk it. Then, I did not know why, but I managed to endure it. Mata smiled bitterly. You don't say, ever since I went through this lava mountain range trial. I treasured every drop of water. At that time, I did not know how I managed to endure it. Every time I opened the flask, I would only touch my lips and drink 1 or 2 drops each time. Thinking of those bitter days, Mata felt that he had no hope in life at that time. Hearing this senior brother's bitter experience, everyone could not help but look at him sympathetically. Mata noticed the gazes of his junior sisters, and could not help but touch his nose awkwardly. So this time, before entering the lava mountain range, I did not need teacher's reminder at all. I took out all the water stored in my inner world. Mata took off his outer clothes, revealing the flask hanging on his waist, which was even more than the little fatties. Everyone could not help but twitch their mouths. You are really well prepared. Qi Xianxian was speechless. Hee hee. Mata smiled. Of course. Don't tell me that water is our life in the lava mountain range. Starving for 2 days is not a problem for people of our realm. However, the lack of water is really uncomfortable. Arbor looked at them speechlessly, and said to the little fatty, Drink, don't die of thirst. Little fatty shook his head vigorously. No, I can't drink it. It was only the first day, and he had been here for less than 4 hours. I'll hold on. Arbor. Actually, you don't have to be so frugal. Don't worry. Drink if you want. Don't choke yourself. Arbor said. Qi Xianxian nodded and said, We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Maybe we can complete the mission in 2 or 3 days. Everyone looked at Qi Xianxian with a you must be dreaming expression. Qi Xianxian rubbed her nose and said, I agree with Jojo. After drinking, eating, and recuperating, we'll be on our way. As long as I can kill 10 second-grade spirit beasts as soon as possible, wouldn't I be able to complete my task? Then, we will be able to summon our teacher and bring us back. Little Fatty thought about it and agreed. If he didn't drink the water here, he would be the one suffering. If he really became dehydrated, he might even implicate his teammates. Little Fatty thought for a while, took out his flask, and gulped down half of the water in one go. Then, he sighed and looked at Arbor. Sigh, after drinking the water, I feel even hungrier. Arbor looked at him expressionlessly. Didn't you bring a few steamed buns? Chapter 1652. Just eat too, Arbor said with a speechless expression. When they set off, they wanted to carry as much water as possible, so they took relatively less food. The little fatty took out a bag of plain white steamed buns without any fillings from his bag and took out 2 of them. He handed one to Arbor and Qi Xianxian, and he actually planned to split the other one into 3 portions to share with Duanmuqing and Mata. Arbor was speechless. Why did he feel like he couldn't bear to look at this? Such a small bun was only the size of a palm. It was barely enough for 2 girls, let alone 3 men. Arbor was speechless. However, she didn't want to take out the food and water from Paradise Planet for the time being. After all, they were here to train in the lava mountain range, not for a vacation. Unless there was no other choice, it was better to persevere and train their willpower like what Mata said. Little Fatty held a third of the bun and ate it with relish. Arbor had originally wanted to secretly replenish their food, but he gave up on that idea for the time being. Little Fatty was so stingy that he even wanted to share a bun with 3 people. She guessed that he wanted to divide his food supply into many portions. Speaking of which, that bag of mantus could be finished by the little fatty within a day if he ate as much as he wanted. But now, he wanted to rely on his pitiful rations to hold out for 7 days. Qi Xianxian didn't make any preparations. She only took out a bottle of water and a bag of snacks from her inner world before entering the lava mountain range and kept them close to her body. Seeing the three men so pitifully sharing a bun, she couldn't help but look at them sympathetically. She tilted her head and thought for a while. Then, she still took out 2 pieces of pastries from the bag of rations. She gave one piece to Duanmuqing and the other 2 men, and shared the other piece with Arbor. Arbor looked at Little Fatty and Qi Xianxian. They were so stingy that he couldn't say anything else. The 5 of them rested for a while. After eating and drinking, they planned to set off to look for second-grade spirit beasts. In this lava mountain range, as far as the eye could see, there were basically huge red rocks. Today is the first day. Right now, we're the ones with the most energy. Duanmuqing said, I think our goal today should be to hunt at least 3 second-grade spirit beasts. Mata and the others nodded. The little fatty smiled in a simple and honest manner, but our biggest problem now is where are we going to find those second-grade spirit beasts? If we just wander aimlessly in the lava mountain range, the first thing we will exhaust is our own physical strength. Arbor blinked, coughed lightly, and said, actually, I have a way to solve this once and for all. However, although the method was good, the actual process was a little dangerous. Are you willing to take the risk? Duanmuqing was stunned. He turned to look at Arbor and couldn't help but ask, what idea do you have? Why don't you tell us so that we can discuss it? Arbor turned to look at him and nodded. Actually, I can refine a kind of medicinal powder to attract mystic beasts. It's just that this medicinal powder has to be controlled to a certain amount. But even I can't control this amount. Because, cough cough, if we spread too much medicinal powder, it might attract all the mystic beasts in this area. When that happens, I'm afraid we won't be able to handle it. Chapter 1653. Qi Xianxian and Little Fatty widened their eyes in shock when they heard this. You actually have such a strange method to attract Xian beasts. Qi Xuanxuan's mouth was wide open. Little Fatty added, isn't that great? You can refine this medicinal powder. We can wait patiently for those Xian beasts to come to us. Yes. When the time comes, we'll kill one if one comes. If 2 come, we'll kill both. Who knows, we might even be able to complete the mission on the first day and leave this godforsaken place. Qi Xianxian chuckled. Everyone looked at Qi Xianxian with a speechless expression. Miss, you're so optimistic. Arbor shook her head. The amount of this medicinal powder can't be controlled. If it's too little, we might not be able to attract many Xian beasts. But if it's too much, we'll be surrounded and attacked by the Xian beasts. Who knows, we might even be exhausted to death. Of course, that kind of situation definitely didn't exist. If it was really a critical moment, Arbor could also get Little Tree to drag them into Paradise Planet. But in this way, the true meaning of training was lost. Then why don't you refine this medicinal powder first, and we'll try to see if it works by sprinkling a little. If it works, we can increase the amount. Duanmuqing suggested. Arbor nodded. Then we won't need to try it once. They would need to try many times to be able to control the amount of this medicinal powder. Arbor secretly pursed her lips. Duanmuqing looked at her and asked, then how long do you need to refine this medicinal powder? Arbor waved her hand, and the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron suddenly appeared in her hand. Everyone only saw a small copper cauldron in her palm. After a few seconds, the cauldron grew in size and landed on the reddish-brown ground with a thud. At the same time, a few medicinal ingredients were also in Arbor's hand. I need about 5 minutes to refine this medicinal powder. She only needed 5 minutes to refine a medicinal powder that could attract Xian beasts. Everyone looked at her in shock. The way this girl refined the medicinal powder seemed to be a little casual. She seemed to be carelessly throwing a few medicinal ingredients into the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. In fact, the amount of medicinal herbs used was just right. Everyone stared at him intently. Arbor waved his hand and gently patted the lid of the cauldron. Clusters of crimson flames automatically rose from the cauldron. The body of the red copper cauldron instantly became transparent and beautiful like colored glass. The medicine cauldron spun slowly, and 2 of the 9 stars on the cauldron immediately lit up. This was the subtlety of the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. Arbor had been refining medicinal pills a while ago, and had already practiced with the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron for a while, so he already had a good understanding of it. The meaning of these 9 stars was extraordinary. Ever since the 2nd star on the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron lit up, she realized that the refining speed of the small cauldron had obviously doubled. Therefore, she suspected that every star on the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron was extraordinary. Unfortunately, this small cauldron had a huge appetite. If he wanted the 9 stars on the small cauldron to light up one by one, he had to feed it a large amount of rare ores. Last time, she had fed the small cauldron a lot of high-grade forging materials. She had watched as the cauldron's fire turned these materials into a liquid and was absorbed by the small cauldron. But repeatedly feeding it high-grade forging materials was not enough to satisfy the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron's huge appetite. Chapter 1654. In the end, it was the 2 small grains of Arctic star gravel that allowed it to rise by a level, and the 2nd star of the 9 stars finally lit up. Refining some powder that could attract mystical beasts was simply a piece of cake for the current 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. Thus, the powder in the cauldron quickly took shape. The moment Arbor opened the cauldron lid, everyone looked into the cauldron with interest, only to see a thick layer of white powder covering the walls and bottom of the cauldron. Arbor stretched out her hand and lightly patted the powder, causing it to jump up and be absorbed by a porcelain bottle in her palm. Qi Xianxian blinked and asked curiously, "That's it?" Arbor nodded and flipped the porcelain bottle upside down. She casually sprinkled some of the powder out, and with a slight sweep of her sleeve, the powder was dispersed by the wind. "Let's hide and watch first." Arbor was naturally unwilling to stand here and act as a target. Following that, the few of them hid behind the rocks and watched the situation unfold. Because Arbor was still unable to control the amount of powder she used, she only took a small amount and mixed it into the air, causing the powder to scatter. The few of them hid behind the rocks and waited. Not long after, they saw 2 to 3 level 12 mystical beasts wobbling over. Arbor abruptly jumped out from behind the huge rock and waved her small hand. The remaining 4 people immediately jumped over and gathered their strength without any explanation. With a wave of violent attacks, the 3 unlucky mystical beasts were killed in a short while. Arbor lowered her head and rummaged through the crystal cores. She only found a small piece on one of the mystical beasts. She turned around and gestured to everyone to hide. With her head lowered, Arbor once again pulled out a small bottle from her sleeve and poured out some powder that attracted mystical beasts. However, just as she was about to put away the small bottle, she heard a girl's giggle from not far away. This giggle made her hair stand on end. Arbor's small hand trembled slightly for no reason. That pinch of powder that attracted mystical beasts was unavoidably twice as much as before. When she turned around and realized that something was wrong, she took back the porcelain bottle. By then, the powder had already spread in all directions with the flow of the air. Arbor felt guilty for a moment. He hurriedly pulled Qi Xianxian, who was sticking her head out to look around, and gestured to Duan Muqing and the other 2. The 5 of them quickly found a place to hide. Just as he finished hiding, he heard a flurry of footsteps approaching from afar. However, he heard the woman's voice say, the fire belly snake has always been something that can only be found by chance. These little things like hot places the most. I think there must be some in the lava mountain range. It's just that. The woman's voice paused for a moment before she continued with a smile. The fire belly snake moves very quickly, and its body is very short and agile. I'm afraid it will be very difficult to catch it alive. The mission given by Fairy Yellow Crane this time is to obtain 3 live fire vipers. A cold voice interrupted the woman's words. Otherwise, the mission will be considered a failure. Fairy has no obligation to pay half a spirit coin. The young woman, who was surrounded by everyone like a moon surrounded by a myriad of stars, looked to be about 27 or 28 years old. She was born with a charming appearance. This was Fairy Yellow Crane, who was equally famous as the beautiful fairy from the Palace of Cold Blood. She was one of the 5 most capable subordinates of Shantian Prefecture's current prefecture lord. Chapter 1655. Lava Mountain Range was an open forest. If someone wanted to enter to search for snake gall and medicinal herbs, it was possible. This time, Fairy Yellow Crane had issued a mission to search for fire vipers. The snake gall of fire vipers was an important component in refining fire spirit pills. Fairy Yellow Crane's objective was self-evident. She was an extremely famous pill refiner in Shantian Prefecture. She wanted to refine a black-grade fire spirit pill that could raise fire spirit energy. However, it was a pity that their team had been roaming around the lava mountains for 3 to 5 days without seeing any signs of the fire vipers. On the other hand, they were running out of water and rations. Fairy Yellow Crane looked at the 10 over-exhausted team members and frowned slightly. Why don't we discuss this? Next, should we leave Lava Mountain Range first and go to the nearby village to replenish our supplies, or continue searching here until we complete the mission? A female team member in the team immediately raised her hand and said, I feel that we should leave and rest first. Otherwise, if we forcefully stay in this Lava Mountain Range, not to mention not finding any fire vipers, even our own lives are about to be exhausted. Fairy Yellow Crane was stunned for a while when she heard that. Then she sighed and nodded. All right then, let's leave Lava Mountain Range first. Fire vipers. Suddenly, a male team member pointed at a small red snake that had squeezed out from a crack in the rock and suddenly exclaimed. Ha, speaking of fire vipers would appear. Previously, they were still worried that after wandering around the Lava Mountain Range for so long, they hadn't seen anything like the fire viper, which was originally very common. Perhaps there really weren't any fire vipers in this mountain range. Who would have thought that just as they were talking, without any warning, a fire viper would slip out from a crack in the rock? Ha ha ha, this was really finding something by chance after wearing out iron shoes in a fruitless search. 1, 2, 3. When she saw over 100 fire vipers twisting their way over, Fairy Yellow Crane's originally happy face turned black. Don't let these fire vipers surround us. Prepare for battle. Prepare for battle. Another person shouted loudly and his face instantly changed. What kind of joke was this? If they were surrounded by these fire venomous snakes, no matter how many people there were, they wouldn't be able to survive. Although these fire venomous snakes were commonly seen, they were extremely difficult to deal with when grouped together. When there are only 1 or 2 of them, you don't have to be afraid of them at all. Just deal with them directly. But now, what was the meaning of this group of fire venomous snakes? Fairy Yellow Crane led a group of exhausted teammates to begin the battle. Arbor and the others hid behind the boulder and watched the battle between the unlucky bastards and the snakes from afar. Fairy Yellow Crane summoned a palm-sized fireball and threw it at the group of snakes. Immediately, more than 10 fire vipers crawling on the ground were wiped out. Barely resisting the urge to vomit, Fairy Yellow Crane frowned and said, "Everyone, work harder. We can't fail miserably at such an easy task. Once we finish off this batch of fire-venomous snakes, as long as we can get 3 gallbladders, our mission will be considered complete. This time, I will give everyone some appropriate compensation. Fairy Yellow Crane's words once again aroused the enthusiasm of the crowd. In any case, with a generous reward, there would definitely be brave men. For the sake of the spirit coins, a portion of the people also gave it their all. Chapter 1656. Little Fatty and Chi Xianxian squatted by Arbor's side, looking at the group that was fighting intensely with the snake horde. They lowered their voices and asked, "Jojo, when are these snakes going to retreat? They're not spirit beasts either. They're not what we're going to deal with." Arbor looked at the fierce battle in the distance expressionlessly. How would I know? This kind of medicinal powder that attracted mystic beasts could stay in the air for at least 1 to 4 hours. Humans would not be able to smell it, but if beasts smelled it, they would naturally rush over. It seemed that her little hand had trembled just now, and she had scattered too much medicinal powder. However, this was something that could not be helped. She could not get it back even if she scattered it too much. She could only say that Fairy Yellow Crane and her group were unlucky. Who asked them to appear with crooked smiles when she was sprinkling the powder on the table? Arbor pulled Chi Xianxian back, pulling the two's probing heads back. As they were talking quietly, they suddenly heard the howls of tigers and wolves from afar, accompanied by the cries of wild elephants. Arbor reached out and pressed down on Chi Xuanxuan's little head, then he stuck his little head out of the rock. With one look, he hurriedly pulled his head back. Meeting the inquisitive gazes of the other 4, Arbor coughed softly. "No, nothing." The 4 instantly looked at him with a "look at your expression, you don't look like you're fine" gaze. Chi Xianxian could not hold back and hurriedly stuck her head out of the big rock. With just one look, if Arbor had not suddenly reached out and covered her mouth, Chi Xianxian would have cried out in shock. What the hell, how many beasts are there outside? Jackals, wolves, tigers, leopards, fucking all came, and there were also many wild elephants. They moved their fat legs and stepped on the red mud, chasing after a battered and exhausted group, rushing towards Fairy Yellow Crane's direction. Che Rumen and Li Qian probably felt that they had never been so unlucky in their entire lives. Clearly, their group had been hunting for level 15 mystic beasts, but suddenly, a group of mystic beasts rushed out and attacked their group without any explanation. Was there any justice left in this world? These dumb beasts seemed to have been provoked by something as they chased after their own group without any regard for their lives. Where did this irreconcilable hatred come from? Was it worth it for them to attack as a group? Che Rumen and Li Qian could not understand why everything was going well before, but from just now, everything had developed in an abnormal direction. The mystic beasts in the area all gathered together and attacked them. Could it be that someone was secretly manipulating the situation? Che Rumen's fist, which contained the power of fire spirit, smashed hard on the head of one of the jackals, directly smashing its head into its neck and causing it to cave in. While she was at it with a kick, a kick. That huge kick sent the grey wolf flying into the air. With a bang, it collided head-on with a tiger that was charging at it. With Rumen with a roar with Arto to S, of the Arto to S even was to Che, it, to Che. Che Rumen jumped in fright and hurriedly twisted the ring on her finger, activating the defensive barrier at the first moment. In the blink of an eye, the tiger had already pounced in front of Che Rumen. Its claws tore forward, but it was blocked by the tough defensive barrier. Chapter 1657. Che Rumen broke out in a cold sweat. When she saw the tiger claw pouncing towards her face, she really thought that her delicate little face was about to be torn apart by the tiger claw. Fortunately, her face was fine. Che Rumen subconsciously raised her hand to touch her face and let out a long sigh. As long as her face is fine. Che Rumen's hand lingered on her delicate skin, thinking, she has such a beautiful face, nothing must happen to her. Che Rumen activated her defensive barrier and hid behind Li Qian. She hunched her shoulders and half-squatted behind Li Qian as she whispered, "What should we do now?" The situation before them was quite critical. Just a few short minutes ago, there were already over 1,000 mystic beasts gathered around. The speed at which the mystic beasts were gathering was simply terrifying. Che Rumen's expression flickered. She was already calculating in her heart how to escape later. No matter what, even if she had to abandon her teammates and run by herself, she had to run out. After all, she was only 18 years old, a flower-like age. She could not give up her life in such a lousy place. Just as Che Rumen's team of 5 and Fairy Yellow Crane's team of more than 10 were bitterly fighting against the mystic beast horde. Arbor's team of 5 was squatting far away, their sharp gazes searching for the second-level spirit beast among the beasts. Found it. Little Fatty almost cheered out loud, but then he thought of something and hurriedly covered his mouth to suppress his voice. Right now, they were preparing to loot a burning house, so it was best not to make a sound for now. Arbor naturally also saw the spirit beast mixed in with the mystic beast horde. To be exact, it was a third-level spirit beast. It seemed that the medicinal powder was starting to take effect. Arbor's eyes brightened. He stood up and stuck an invisibility talisman on himself as he said faintly, "I'll go lure that third-level spirit beast over." Everyone, Chi Xian looked smugly at the puzzled little fatty and chuckled. "Let me tell you something. Our JoJo is the only one in the world. Big. Talisman. Master. Are you surprised? Are you surprised?" Chi Xian was waiting to see little Fatty's shocked expression. After waiting for a long time, she realized that little Fatty didn't react at all. She couldn't help but pout, "Little Fatty, aren't you shocked?" The little Fatty shook his head vigorously and said, "I won't be surprised no matter what you say." After saying that, he reached out and patted his chest. "If you tell me now that JoJo can actually go to heaven, I'll believe you too." When Chi Xian heard this, the corners of her mouth involuntarily twitched. She looked at little Fatty as if she was looking at a weirdo. "You really have no integrity." Arbor, on the other hand, had already stuck an invisibility talisman on his body while the others were whispering to each other. Then, he slipped away from the group of spirit beasts like a wisp of smoke and swayed in front of the third-grade spirit beast. Suddenly, he stretched out his hand, and a row of icicles appeared between his fingers. Then, he pierced the third-grade spirit beasts. But the third-rank spirit beast suddenly roared and swung its head, sending a man in Fairy Yellow Crane's group flying. That man didn't even understand what was going on before he flew into the sky. The third-grade spirit beast rampaged through the group of spirit beasts, chasing after the familiar aura that had pierced its butt. Arbor led this big fellow around the group of spirit beasts and ran in front of Duanmuqing and the others. "Hurry up and do it, wake up and catch up on the latest chapter." Chapter 1658. There was no need for Arbor to say anything. The four of them joined forces and attacked together. How could they talk about the rules of the pugilistic world with this third-level spirit beast? They would just beat it up as a group. Ko Hongwen's level 8 earth spirit erupted and built a sturdy earth prison around the spirit beast. At the same time, Chi Xian waved her small hand and a bolt of spirit lightning landed on the third-level spirit beast's head. Duanmuqing and Mata, who were at the side, each attacked with their swords. In less than a minute, they finished off the third-level spirit beast. Arbor bent down and dug out the crystal core from the third-level spirit beast's head. Unlike the red crystal core, This third-level spirit beast's crystal core was pure silver. Although it was small in the palm of his hand, he could feel a strong sense of spiritual pressure coming from it. Arbor put the third-level spirit beast's crystal core into his waist pouch and took out an empty storage talisman to put the third-level spirit beast's corpse inside. Little Fatty looked at her in shock. Jojo. You. Oh, this is a storage talisman. It can store the spirit beast's corpse to prove that we killed 10 spirit beasts. Kiki is. We can prove it by handing over the spirit beast's crystal core. Little Fatty's words were stopped by Qi Xuanxuan's glare. Are you an idiot? Qi Xianxian rudely poked Fatty's head with her finger. It's not like every spirit beast has a crystal core in their head. The instructor told us to kill 10 spirit beasts. What if none of your 10 spirit beasts have a crystal core? How are you going to prove it? You can't be thinking of dragging the 10 spirit beast corpses to the instructor, right? Arbor said expressionlessly. Right. He didn't seem to want to ask this question just now. Little Fatty was distracted by Qi Xianxian and Arbor's words and forgot to ask about Arbor's storage talisman. Mata glanced at Little Fatty in amusement and reminded him, storage talisman. No. Ah, right. Storage talisman. The Little Fatty stammered, this storage talisman, you don't need to use your profound sense to open it. Then, on your body, shui. Food. The Little Fatty stuttered so much that his words were almost out of tune. Suddenly, he felt that Jojo was a bit of a scam. What should he do? Since Jojo had an advanced item like the storage talisman on him, how could he lack water and food? Then why did they split a steamed bun among the three of them? Arbor turned his head and looked at the Little Fatty carefully. He shook his head and said, we're here to train. It's better to feel hungry. Do you know anything about training? It's not like I'm asking you to go on a sightseeing tour. Qi Xianxian retorted. Be a little hungry and don't rely on the storage talisman. Most importantly, he couldn't cheat. Right? Ma Ta looked away. He could not bear to see the Little Fatty's silly look after being scolded. That. Is there anything to eat in the storage talisman? Little Fatty asked with a blank expression. Do you want some, Donghua? Little Fatty nodded his head like he was pounding garlic. Yes, of course he wanted it. What a joke. Just now, he ate 1/3 of the white steamed bun and 1/3 of the pastries. He wasn't full at all. Arbor thought for a moment and took out 10 Donghua from the storage talisman. He gave 2 to each of them and said sternly, don't let that troublesome instructor find out. Everyone nodded obediently. If you're hungry in the future, you can roast that third-level spirit beast. Chapter 1659. Xiao Mu had already thought it through. From the looks of it, that level 3 spirit beast just now was quite big. Although the spiritual beast meat was hard to eat, it was still something that was self-reliant. The main thing was that Wei Wei was always against them. If he were to find out about the storage talisman, he might accuse them of cheating and disqualify them from entering the academy. Arbor didn't really care if he could enter the academy or not. But looking at Qi Xuanxuan's expectant expression, he didn't want to disappoint her. If they ate spiritual beast meat, even if that troublesome teacher found out, he wouldn't have any reason to say anything. Anyway, the spiritual beast was their prey, so what if they ate half of it? The remaining 4 looked at each other silently. Every cultivator knew that the spiritual beast meat wasn't tasty, and unless they had no other choice, no cultivator would eat that kind of old meat. Qi Xianxian and Little Fatty chewed on the winter fruit in their hands and felt that it was crispy, fragrant and juicy. It couldn't be any better. The little fatty even finished off the 2 winter fruits in one go. He looked at Chow Chow ruefully and lamented, "Chow Chow, why do I feel that your winter fruits taste so much better than those that you can buy outside?" I think so too. Winter fruits were sold everywhere. Although the market price of winter fruits was much higher than before, as long as one had profound currency and spirit coins, they could buy winter fruits. So basically everyone had eaten winter fruits before and knew how it tasted. Compared to ordinary fruits, a fist-sized winter fruit had a soft texture and most importantly, it didn't have any moisture. It wasn't like the 2 that they ate. Arbor turned his head and saw that Qi Xian had finished 2 winter fruits and couldn't help but raise his brows. Since when did a fruit like winter fruit from a street stall taste so good? Seeing these 2 people's eager looks, Xiaomu sighed and simply stuffed the 2 winter fruits in her pocket into the little fatty and Qi Xuan's hands. "Leave this place and I'll treat you 2 to your fill. Now, let's settle the spiritual beast matter first." Arbor stuck his head out from behind the rock. After taking a glance, he immediately retracted his head and looked at little fatty and Qi Xian with a strange expression. "What's wrong?" they asked in unison. "Another 4 or 5 teams have come from that side. The Xian beasts have surrounded them." Qi Xian and little fatty hurriedly stuck their heads out to take a look. When they saw what was happening, their jaws almost dropped to the ground. Oh my God! Wasn't it an overwhelming number of Xian beasts? The dark mass of Xian beasts surrounded the 7 teams, including Che Rumen and Fairy Huanghe. They fought to be the first to attack them. As for Che Rumen and the others who were encircled, they were extremely sullen. Che Ruman, who had been taking turns to fight against the mystical beasts, was out of breath. She originally wanted to find a chance to slip away by herself. Who would have thought that a slight hesitation would result in a fleeting opportunity? Now, even if she wanted to escape, she couldn't. "Jojo, what do we do now?" "I'll go and see if there are any spiritual beasts." Arbor's face darkened and he was also filled with displeasure. Was there something wrong with this group of Xian beasts? Just a few would be enough. There were actually a few thousand of them. With such a huge commotion, wouldn't it alarm the spiritual beast in the 2nd type district? Arbor couldn't help but frown when he thought of this. Chapter 1660. What if that divine beast also had nothing better to do and ran over here after eating its fill? Then how should she deal with it? Should she summon all the beasts around her and gang up on it, or gang up on it? Divine beasts were not easy to deal with. Xiao Mu reflexively rubbed her chin and threw them a "wait, look." She stuck an invisibility talisman on herself and ran towards the group of mystic beasts like a wisp of smoke. She flashed through the group of mystic beasts, thinking that her medicinal powder was rather unreliable. How did it attract all the mystic beasts? She finally found a spirit beast in the group of mystic beasts. That spirit beast was tilting its head, and its hairy face was full of vigilance. Its pair of small eyes rolled around, looking back and forth, as if it sensed the aura of some approaching danger. Arbor hurriedly squeezed her way over and imitated it, planning to give its butt a good smack. Suddenly, that spirit beast roared angrily at where she was hiding. Immediately, more than a dozen mystic beasts slapped at her head with their claws. Ah! Arbor was stunned, but she reacted extremely quickly and escaped from the claws of several mystic beasts. The shining icicle in her hand flashed, and several mystic beasts' necks were sliced open. In the blink of an eye, she had already arrived in front of that spirit beast. Roar! This spirit beast was rather sharp. Based on the fact that it could not see her at all when she was invisible, it could still be so sharp and find her position to attack first. It could be seen that this spirit beast was somewhat unusual. Moreover, this fellow should be extremely afraid of death. It instinctively hid in the group of mystic beasts and commanded them to protect itself. Arbor was almost overturned by the mystic beasts time and time again, so she was somewhat angry. With a kick of her leg, she flipped onto the back of a mystic beast, a rhinoceros. With a heavy kick, she forced that rhinoceros to charge straight into the group of mystic beasts ahead. Fairy Yellow Crane and the others, who were fighting fiercely with the group of beasts, turned their heads and saw a rampaging rhinoceros charging towards the group of beasts. When they looked again, they saw a plainclothed girl sitting on the rhinoceros' back. In her shock, she could not help but raise her hand to rub her eyes. Indeed, it was a young girl in plain clothes. She suddenly appeared like a ghost in the middle of the group of beasts, as if she had appeared out of thin air. She had never seen this person before. "Who are you?" Fairy Yellow Crane cried out sharply. Arbor knew that this was bad. It seemed that this woman's cultivation was much higher than hers, so she could see her under the invisibility charm at a glance. However, Fairy Yellow Crane's group of idiots clearly did not have Fairy Yellow Crane's eyesight. No one noticed Chow Mu's existence. Instead, they all stared at Fairy Yellow Crane with strange gazes. One of the women couldn't help but giggle. "Fairy Yellow Crane, are you seeing things? There's no one in this herd." Arbor couldn't help but grind his teeth when he heard the woman's shrill laughter. It was her, it was her. The woman who had laughed so hard that her hand trembled, causing her to scatter too much of the mystical beast luring powder. "None of you can see it." Fairy Yellow Crane screamed and turned to look at Che Rumen, whose wrists were trembling from chopping mystic beasts. "You can't see that woman either." Che Rumen was about to go crazy from fighting with the mystic beasts beside her. How could she have the time to look back? Even if she heard Fairy Yellow Crane's question, she had no time to respond. Chapter 1661. None of you can see her. Fairy Yellow Crane shrieked. The group of teammates around her all looked at this fairy as if they were looking at a patient. They did not understand what she was yelling about. "You used an invisibility talisman." Subsequently, Immortal Yellow Crane let out an even sharper cry than before. She pointed at Xiao Mu with her eyes bulging wide open. Everyone acted as if they were facing a great enemy. They all drew their weapons and got into a battle stance. They looked warily in the direction Fairy Yellow Crane was pointing at. What? Fairy Yellow Crane meant that there was someone in the beast horde. Damn, there was actually someone in the midst of the overwhelming horde of beasts. Who exactly was it? Arbor had already driven away the rhinoceros and the surrounding small mystical beasts. She came to the side of the spirit beast and leaped onto the back of the spirit beast. When she landed on the spirit beast's back, she felt the spirit beast's anger from the bottom of its heart. It seemed to want to shake her off with all its might as it roared angrily. After this roar, the beast horde became restless and charged at Fairy Yellow Crane and the others, launching a wave of attacks. Every mystical beast fought with Fairy Yellow Crane and the others as if they did not care about their lives. Fairy Yellow Crane and the others could not help but complain incessantly in their hearts. It was originally a very simple matter. Fairy Yellow Crane issued a mission to search for fire vipers and personally led the team. They only needed to find a few fire vipers. Who would have thought, who would have thought? Things actually developed into this situation. Chirp, chirp, chirp. A little fat squirrel suddenly jumped down from the rhinoceros' back and ran toward the corpses of the mystical beasts on the ground. It kept jumping back and forth on the corpses. If someone looked at it carefully, they would realize that every time this little fat squirrel landed on a mystical beast's corpse, it would accurately use its sharp little claws to cut open the mystical beast's head and dig out the crystal core inside. After this action, the mystical beast crystal cores on the field were basically all collected by the little fat squirrel. The pitiful fairy Yellow Crane and the others did not know about this at all. Even if they cleaned up the battlefield afterwards, they would only think that they were unlucky. They had killed so many Xian beasts, but not a single one had a crystal core. It's you who found so many Xian beasts to attack us. Why? Fairy Huang He shrieked hysterically at Qiao Mu. Qiao Mu's face darkened as she gazed at her. Afterwards, she forcefully hammered that spiritual beast, forcing it to hastily kick its legs and flee. That enormous spirit beast had the head of a tiger, and its running and jumping speed was much faster than that of an ordinary tiger. He rampaged through the group of Xian beasts, knocking some of them unconscious. Arbor stabbed its head with the sharp icicle in his hand. The spirit beast jumped and roared, wanting to throw Arbor to the ground. Unfortunately, no matter how hard it tried to jump around, no matter how hard it shook its body, Arbor still sat firmly on its back. Roar, roar, roar. Fairy Yellow Crane, what's going on now? The others could not see what Arbor was doing and were somewhat nervous. They could not resist the pressure in their hearts and hurriedly asked Fairy Yellow Crane. Fairy Yellow Crane's expression was also somewhat strange. She could see very clearly that the little girl was clearly trying to lure that enormous spirit beast away from the mystical beast horde. In that case, she had misunderstood the other party. The little girl was clearly not a bad person. Chapter 1662. Not only was the little girl not bad, she was even very virtuous. Seeing how she dared to fight for these people she had never met, taking the lead to attract the spirit beast's attention, what a virtuous child she was. Little girl, I'll help you. Fairy Yellow Crane immediately shouted. Just as she was about to fly up and give Arbor a hand, Che Ruan fell to the ground with a heavy thud. A large head came into contact with the yellow soil with a loud thud. The sound of the impact caused Fairy Yellow Crane to stop in her tracks, and she turned to look at Che Ruan. On the other hand, Qiao Mu turned to glance at that Fairy Huang He. She blinked in bewilderment before hastily urging the spiritual beast beneath her to run towards Duan Muqing and the others. She couldn't understand why the woman who was yelling at her just now suddenly wanted to help her. Sigh, a woman's heart was truly like a needle at the bottom of the ocean. Jojo couldn't understand. Seeing that Qiao Mu had finally brought that spirit beast back after expending so much effort, Duan Muqing and the others immediately surrounded her. After another round of thorough gang beating, they finally disposed of that spirit beast. Arbor frowned as she looked at the mystic beast horde in the distance. She raised her hand to rub her nose and coughed lightly. Don't you guys feel that there are very few spirit beasts in this place? Wasn't it pitifully few? The medicinal powder had already attracted thousands of mystic beasts, but there were still no signs of spirit beasts. The two spirit beasts that occasionally ran over had to expend a great deal of effort to lure them out from the mystic beast horde. Could it be that there aren't many spirit beasts in this type of area? Qi Xianxian asked. Little Fatty nodded. I feel that it's possible. Then I'll make a medicinal powder to drive away the beast horde and talk after driving them away. Later, we'll find a place closer to the second type of area and try this medicinal powder. Hearing this, everyone nodded in agreement. Arbor then summoned the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron from her conscious and placed it on the ground, beginning to refine the medicinal powder to drive away the mystic beasts. They felt that watching her refine medicine was simply a form of enjoyment. The little girl happily took out the herbs, put them in, and refined them. The whole process only took a few minutes. Qi Xianxian could not help but ask, pill concoction is actually so simple. Arbor froze for a moment, then shook his head and said, it's this 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron that's amazing. It simplifies the steps of refining medicine. Before this, when Arbor used the stew pot to refine pills, he had to go through the process of selecting the herbs and grinding the essences of the herbs. Of course, later on, he had to look at the fire and control the heat of the stew pot. But now, the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron would automatically extract the essence of the medicinal herbs and draw out the impurities, so this step could be eliminated. Moreover, the step of watching the fire could be omitted, because the cauldron fire in the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron would adjust its power to suit the medicine in the cauldron. If he were to concoct pills, he might need to spend more time. After all, the formation of the pill also depended on whether or not the fire was ready. But now that Arbor was only refining some medicinal powder, it was too easy. He did not even need to use the fire to liquefy the herbs. Powder was the easiest to make, so it would only take about 4 to 5 minutes to complete. She liked this little cauldron more and more now. Back then, she had used a mystic breakthrough pill and a blood stasis dispersing pill to exchange for this cauldron. It was simply a treasure that she had picked up. After refining the medicinal powder, Arbor used a porcelain bottle to keep the powder. Have a meal before coming back. Chapter 1663. With a faint smile on her lips, Xiaomu gently stroked her small cauldron. The small cauldron seemed to be sentient and seemed to know its owner's fondness for it. The cauldron even revealed a faint glow, as if responding. With a whoosh, she recalled the small cauldron back into her conscious. Arbor coughed lightly and looked up at Qi Xianxian and the others. Go a little further away. The smell of this medicinal powder might not be too pleasant. It was more than unpleasant. The stench was simply overwhelming. Once the medicinal powder was scattered, everyone looked like they were constipated. When Arbor finished scattering the medicinal powder calmly and returned to their side, Qi Xianxian and Qi Xianxian stared at each other. Qi Xianxian covered her nose and looked at her curiously. Chow chow, don't you stink? Wasn't that stoic face too calm? Arbor shook her head and glanced at little Fatty, who was puking from the stench. She replied very seriously, oh, I blocked my 5 senses, so I don't smell anything. What? Ma-ta, little Fatty, and Qi Xianxian looked at Arbor in bewilderment. Don't you think this little thing is a scam? Wouldn't it have been fine if she had also blocked their 5 senses from the start? Why did she have to tell them to go a little further away with a straight face? It was as if they wouldn't smell anything if they walked a little further away. On the side, Duanmu Qing couldn't resist bursting into laughter. He stared at Arbor for a long time. He wondered if it was his misconception. He kept feeling that this little girl had been intentionally or unintentionally avoiding his gaze the entire time. When Duanmu Qing thought of this, he couldn't help but frown. Arbor glanced at Ma-ta and the others indifferently. Her expression was simply that pair of cold and beautiful eyes were clearly saying, are you all idiots? You don't even know how to block your 5 senses when you stink. You still need others to teach you. Ma-ta was speechless. Qi Xianxian and little Fatty exchanged glances and sighed in unison. Fine, they had been led into a trap by the little stoic. Let's go. Arbor waved her small hand. The 5 of them headed toward the second category area. The instructor had said before that they would have to bear the consequences of stepping into the second class area. The second type region had a divine beast overseeing it, and it was not to be trifled with. However, it wasn't impossible to do something strange at the entrance of a second-class area. Xiao Mu's party walked very quickly and soundlessly left from behind the giant rock. On the other hand, the groups of people who were fighting against the profound beasts were all extremely exhausted, and they sighed with emotion that their lives were about to end here. The Xian beasts have retreated. Someone suddenly shouted. Fairy Yellow Crane, who was holding a profound artifact with her trembling right hand, immediately discovered that the beast horde was slowly retreating. These beasts no longer attacked them crazily. Instead, they were like headless flies, fleeing in all directions. Fairy Yellow Crane's eyes flickered as she looked at the profound beasts that scattered like a tide. She let out a long sigh and said, "It's all thanks to that lady's help." "Fairy, what happened? I misunderstood him just now." "That lady was of noble character and unquestionable integrity, leading a powerful spirit beast away without regard for her life," Fairy Yellow Crane praised endlessly. "I think that these profound beasts probably retreated because they sensed the spirit beast's departure." Everyone finally understood when they heard this, and they all nodded in agreement with Fairy Yellow Crane. Only Fairy saw that righteous lady. "That's right. If we meet her next time, we must thank that lady." Chapter 1664. Fairy Yellow Crane nodded with a smile when she heard this. She lowered her head to look at the mystic beast corpses by her feet. "Everyone, clean up the battlefield and see if there are any mystic beast cores or similar items. Some mystic beast's fur and teeth can also be exchanged for a few spirit coins. Everyone, take whatever you want and split it amongst yourselves." Fairy Yellow Crane's voice fell, and the dozen or so members of her team immediately went forward in high spirits to clean up the mystic beast corpses on the ground. But very quickly, everyone discovered that there were so many mystic beast corpses on the ground, but not a single crystal core could be found. "Fairy, this is really strange. This mystic beast Sawtooth Wolf doesn't even have a single tooth." "Oh right, I've been looking for so long, but I haven't seen any mystic beast with a crystal core in its head." "Fairy, I only found 3 fire viper gallbladders. The other fire vipers were completely empty without any gallbladders." Fairy Yellow Crane was taken aback. She went forward and bent down to examine. Indeed, she saw many mystic beast skulls that had clearly been dug open. But what was strange was that these skulls did not seem to have been cut open by a blade. Instead, they seemed to have been clawed open by some sharp object. Fairy Yellow Crane was puzzled and could only stand up and say, "It seems that there should be some powerful spirit beast hiding in the dark. Let's hurry and pack up and leave Lava Mountain Range immediately." Master, look at this. The fire sable's fur can be used to make a fire sable cloak for Master. The teeth of a sharp-toothed wolf. Master, do you like a collar made from sharp-toothed wolf teeth? I don't like it. Arbor had a headache as she interrupted the noisy little fat squirrel. TSK, Master, if you don't want them, you can sell them all for money. And this, fire viper gallbladders. Do you like them, Master? Arbor's face was stoic as she put away the 2 storage talismans that the little fat squirrel handed over into her waist pouch. She nodded and said, "Not bad." The fire viper's gallbladders were a necessary ingredient for refining fire spirit pills. They were good stuff. The fat squirrel immediately chirped happily. Master said she liked them. Arbor turned his head slightly and immediately saw the 4 people's stunned expressions. It turned out that Jojo had sent this fat squirrel to clean up the battlefield with a storage talisman in advance. What else could he have left behind? The 4 could not help but silently light a row of candles for Fairy Yellow Crane and the others in their hearts. He felt that if Yellow Crane Fairy and the others knew the truth, they would definitely beat Jojo to death. Not only did this person take away a lot of crystal cores and snake gallbladders, in the end, he didn't even let go of the teeth and fur of the profound beasts. Arbor carried the rather heavy little fat squirrel and walked in front of everyone with an indifferent expression. She didn't think that little Chirpy had gone overboard at all. That's how it should be. Moreover, she had spent a great deal of effort to lure those profound beasts over, so the spoils of war naturally couldn't benefit Che Ruman's group. The 5 of them followed the map in their memories and arrived at the intersection of the second and first category areas. The crimson rocks here were even larger than those in the first category areas. Each piece was as tall as an adult man. All kinds of rocks were oddly jagged and stood in picturesque disorder in front of them. Arbor took out the medicinal powder that attracted the profound beasts from her pocket and made a gesture for the four of them to spread out. Then, she scattered some of the medicinal powder. Not long after, they heard two beast roars coming from the depths of the stone forest. See you tomorrow. Chapter 1665. The night was already completely dark. This time, the amount of medicinal powder that Arbor scattered was considered moderate. Following the smell, only a dozen or so mystic beasts and 3 spirit beasts ran over. They only took care of those 3 spirit beasts and released the rest. The night in the lava mountain range was very unbearable. Because once night fell, the temperature of the entire mountain range was even hotter than during the day. During the day, you felt like you were in a huge furnace, sweating profusely when you moved. Then at night, you would find yourself in the center of the furnace. Even if you just lay there motionlessly, you would still feel so hot that you wanted to pant. Everyone leaned against the rocks to rest. Just sitting there made their chests feel stuffy and suffocating. Their bodies felt as if they were being roasted in a raging fire, unbearably uncomfortable. Arbor made a self-made ice ball. After it was melted by the heat of the lava mountain range in less than a minute, she stopped wasting her mystic energy. Anyway, it was not very useful to make it. It would be evaporated by the heat in minutes. Arbor also leaned against the rocks to take a nap, replenishing the energy that she had expended. She planned to wait until daybreak to scatter the medicinal powder to attract the spirit beasts and walk right into the trap. To them, they had already hunted 5 spirit beasts on the first day. To them, the mission was already completed quite well. They would strive to complete the mission tomorrow. At that time, they would be able to contact Wei Wei. Master Silver, do you want me to drag you to Paradise Planet to sleep? Little Tree Cho-Cho's voice rang in Arbor's ears. Paradise Planet was naturally full of spring all year round. It was also densely packed with mystic energy, making people feel very comfortable all year round. It was just that Arbor did not want to run to Paradise Planet whenever she encountered any trouble. Moreover, it was just that the resting environment was slightly worse now. Compared to her previous life, she had struggled to survive even in the worst environment. How could she be so pampered in this life? She shook her head resolutely. She could endure it. She must not spoil herself. That was not good. Then Master, can I give you a sip of Cho-Cho's newly brewed spirit tea? Miss Chow smacked her somewhat dry little mouth, and her eyes immediately brightened. She used her mental power to communicate with Cho-Cho. Cho-Cho, the spiritual tea tree can already be picked. That's right. The first batch of spirit tea leaves has already been picked. However, there are only 30 taels. It's only enough to drink 500 times. 30 taels was too little. As expected of the precious spiritual tea tree, its yield was pitifully low. Master, don't worry. The spiritual tea tree can be picked once every half a month. In the future, after our Paradise Planet is transformed into a spirit realm, the production of spirit tea trees will probably double. That's only 60 taels of silver, Arbor complained in his heart. Would you like a cup to refresh yourself, Master? Cho-Cho's voice carried an endless persuasion. Miss Chow nodded, baffled. Then, a cup of spiritual tea with white steam rising from it was delivered to Arbor. It turned out that Cho-Cho had already prepared everything and was just waiting for her to nod her head. The faint spiritual energy mixed with the faint fragrance of tea drifted in the scorching air. Arbor sniffed it and only felt a lingering tea fragrance. She took a light sip and felt her entire body become incomparably comfortable. In a split second, more than half of the exhaustion in her body disappeared. This was too effective. Arbor lowered her head to glance at the spiritual tea and drank it all in one go. Chapter 1666. After drinking a cup of tea, the fragrance lingered in her teeth and cheeks, and she felt relaxed. Arbor only felt that her body was warm and cozy, and she could no longer feel the burning sensation from the fire. It was as if her entire body was soaking in a hot spring, extremely comfortable. Ball, pour me another cup. Is this brewed with spirit tea leaves that are half a tail and a fun? Yes, Master. Master's measurement of medicinal herbs was extremely accurate. Naturally, she could accurately tell the amount of spirit tea in 1 cup. A green vine took the teacup back to Paradise Planet, and within a second, handed another cup of steaming hot spirit tea to Arbor. After drinking another cup of spirit tea, Arbor felt that the mystic energy in her body that had been depleted had completely returned. After drinking the 3rd cup, Arbor could feel a trace of spirit energy circulating slightly in her meridians, slowly flowing through her body. Under the mystic energy in her body, this bit of spirit energy was like a clay ox entering the sea, immediately sinking and disappearing without a trace. However, this could not be denied. If this spirit tea was drunk over a long period of time, it would naturally imperceptibly change the meridians in her body, helping her to shape her spirit meridians, and increasing the spirit energy in her body. When the tea was brewed for the 4th time, the effects were slightly less effective. After drinking 7 cups of water in a row, Arbor felt that the spirit tea in her cup was no different from ordinary tea leaves. However, when ordinary tea leaves were brewed for the 7th time, they were basically so bland that they could not taste anything. Arbor put down the teacup, only feeling that her physical strength had recovered to an extremely optimal state. Even if 3 spirit beasts ran over right now, she could still beat them 3 times in a row. Ball, brew another 4 people's worth of tea. She wanted to treat her teammates to tea. Ball nagged, this tea is too expensive. Right now, it's only enough for 500 people. The more you drink, the less you get. Moreover, with their weak bodies, how can they endure this spirit tea? Although it nagged incessantly, Ball still ran off to brew the tea. Not long after, it told her that the tea was ready. Arbor turned a deaf ear to Ball's nagging. Thus, she excitedly got up and ran over to wake up her teammates one by one with great interest. Duanmu Qing was not in a deep sleep. When he felt someone walk to his side, his eyes suddenly opened. Arbor was hesitating whether or not he should reach out to push him when he suddenly saw him open his eyes. He subconsciously took a step back and looked away guiltily. He coughed lightly and said, since you're awake, get up and drink some tea." The little fatty raised his hand and yawned. His eyes were hazy as he said, "Jojo, I thought some profound beast would attack us in the middle of the night. What's wrong with this kid? Waking them up in the middle of the night for tea. Why are you drinking tea? I want to sleep." Qi Xianxian sat there with her head drooping. She felt that her entire body was drenched in sweat. Her entire body felt sticky and uncomfortable. "Come, have some tea." Arbor handed cups of tea to the 5 of them. "Drink up." Unable to refuse such hospitality, the 4 of them picked up their teacups and drank. After sleeping for most of the night, he indeed felt very thirsty. This cup of tea came at the right time. After drinking a cup of tea, the 4 of them widened their eyes. It was as if the little fatty's soul had returned to him. He stuttered, "Jojo, this tea. How strange. Where did Jojo get the tea in the middle of the night? It was still fucking hot. How do you feel?" Arbor wanted to know if the effects of the spirit tea they drank were the same as hers. Chapter 1667. This feeling is too good. Little Fatty slapped his thigh, feeling his spirit lift. I feel as comfortable as if I'm soaking in spring water. Suddenly, I don't feel the scorching heat anymore. Chi Xuanxuan's eyes lit up. She felt that the sticky and smelly sweat all over her body seemed to have disappeared. Even though she was sitting on top of the lava mountain range, she could still feel the cool and refreshing night breeze. Right, what kind of tea is this? It's too magical. What's up with the 36,000 small pores all over her body and the comfortable feeling? Arbor took out a teapot and filled the teacups in front of the four of them. Another cup. The four of them hurriedly reached for the cups. They didn't care about talking anymore, nor did they care about whether it was hot or not. Like cows drinking water, they gulped down another cup. How do you feel? Arbor asked again. I feel that my whole body is filled with profound energy. The profound energy that was consumed earlier has all been recovered. Little Fatty stuttered, his eyes filled with disbelief. This was too fast. Even the profound recovery elixir wasn't this effective. The profound recovery elixir that was sold on the market could only recover 1/10 of one's profound energy. And this ordinary cup of tea, actually soothed the profound energy in their bodies by 100%. My God, what kind of tea is this? While holding a small notebook and brush, Xiao Mu earnestly recorded down the effects of the medicine. In other words, the first cup of this spiritual tea could open up the human body's limbs, bones, and meridians, making you feel as if you were bathing in a hot spring. The second cup would restore your whole body's strength. The third cup's effect was to inject a little spiritual energy into the body. After drinking it, the effect wouldn't be too great. Arbor kept the notebook and looked at the four dumbfounded people. The fourth cup's effect isn't too great. Do you still want to drink it? What a joke. If they still didn't know that this tea was extraordinary, then they would definitely be fools. With such good tea, how could they not drink it? Moreover, Jojo only said that the effect wasn't great. He didn't say that it was completely ineffective. Of course they couldn't waste it. Seeing the four of them nod their heads in unison, Arbor refilled their glasses. Just like her, he drank 7 cups of water in a row. His stomach was probably filled with tea. Arbor waved his hand and said, "Go to sleep." What was laughable was that the 5 of them seemed to have been injected with chicken blood and were in high spirits. How could they still sleep? After tossing and turning for a while, Arbor suddenly got up from the rock. The other 4 also sat up and looked at her speechlessly. Ahem. Arbor coughed lightly with an indifferent expression. Why don't we scatter some powder now and provoke some spirit beasts to fight? Good idea. Qi Xianxian immediately agreed. Now that her eyes were clear and her mind was clear, she did not feel sleepy at all. It was useless to just lie there and roll around. She might as well get some spiritual beasts to continue with the mission. Seeing that the 4 of them had no objections, Arbor took out a porcelain bottle filled with medicinal powder from his pocket and sprinkled it. It was an exciting night. In the middle of the night, the entire lava mountain range was restless. Many beasts ran towards Arbor and the others. The shadows of the mystic beasts galloping in the forest affected Fairy Yellow Crane, Che Rumen, and the others. They had no idea what was going on. They only knew that the mystic beasts in the entire lava mountain range were very busy tonight. Chapter 1668. At the first glimmer of dawn, the 5 people harvested 3 more spirit beast corpses. Arbor stuffed them into his storage talisman. After a night of torment, the 5 people were a bit exhausted, but thankfully, they had a decent harvest. Looking at this mission, they basically completed 70% or so. Ma Ta was incredibly happy. He flipped the spirit beast meat on the grill with one hand and said with a smile, "Oh my God, I never knew that the entrance test could be played like this. Compared to our entrance test this time, TSK, my entrance test back then was filled with trials and tribulations and was extremely bitter." The other 4 people were currently sitting around the grill with their eyes closed to recover the mystic energy in their bodies. Sweat trickled down their foreheads. The spiritual tea had been consumed in their bodies for an entire night and had already been completely consumed. They once again felt the unbearable scorching heat in their surroundings, but no one asked Arbor about last night's spiritual tea, nor did anyone ask Arbor for that spiritual tea to drink. Arbor inwardly felt that although these teammates of his looked silly, they were actually quite reliable. After drinking the spiritual tea and going through an entire night of fierce fighting, everyone felt that their cultivation had improved slightly. Qi Xian also sensed that the barrier to her peak level, 13 mystic cultivation was already on the verge of breaking. She opened her eyes joyfully and said, I think I'm about to advance." The little stoic also opened her eyes when she heard this, and a faint smile appeared in her eyes. She took out a mystic breakthrough pill and handed it to her. "Eat it. I'll guard you. Advance." She only said a few words, but it made Qi Xian feel extremely moved. Qi Xian nodded at her but didn't say any words of gratitude. She only took the mystic breakthrough pill and consumed it without hesitation. Then she closed her eyes again and blocked her 5 senses, entering a vacuum cultivation mode to advance. Soon, Qiao Mu clearly saw waves of mystic energy drifting over from above the stone forest. Mystic energy from all directions was swarming into Qi Xuanxuan's body. Instructor Wei Wei, who was sitting quietly on a huge rock in the lava mountain range, suddenly opened his eyes. He raised his head to look at the restless profound energy on the mountain range and muttered to himself, "Someone actually advanced in the lava mountain range." Wei Wei closed his eyes again, ignoring everything around him. In the other room, Fairy Yellow Crane looked at her teammates with a pale face and said, "Let's leave the lava mountain range now. Last night was really lively. All the Xian beasts in the entire lava mountain range have heard the news, haven't they? They couldn't sleep well that night." Originally, she had already obtained 3 Fire Viper's gallbladders yesterday. After completing the mission, she could immediately leave the lava mountains. However, it was already late at night, and it wasn't safe to walk in the lava mountain range at night. Therefore, Fairy Yellow Crane decided that everyone would endure for one more night. After resting enough, they would set off the next morning. In the end, things didn't go as planned. That night, let alone rest, Fairy Yellow Crane and the others were all on tenterhooks, not daring to close their eyes. They were worried that those mischievous mystic beasts would be blind and surround them at some point. After spending a deceptive night, when everyone was resolutely planning to leave, Fairy Yellow Crane also discovered that mystic energy from all directions was gathering in one place in the sky above the mountain range. Chapter 1669. Fairy Yellow Crane glanced over in shock and muttered to herself, "Someone actually advanced in such a harsh environment." Then, she did not pay any more attention to it and led the team back to where they came from. Wait. A weak voice came from beside her, causing Fairy Yellow Crane to stop in her tracks. Fairy Yellow Crane turned her head and saw Che Rumen, who looked exhausted. She was half lying on Li Qian's arms and waving at her. "Friend, can you sell us some water?" After a series of fierce battles, not only did Che Rumen feel exhausted, but she could not even lift her hands. Even the feeling of longing for water was driving her crazy. She wanted to drink water, now was the time. However, all of the teammates in the team had also drunk all the water on them during the fierce battle. In the process of fighting with the mystical beasts, they had consumed a lot of their physical strength. Only by constantly replenishing their water could they barely support themselves from falling to the ground. Although they persevered in the end, they ran out of water on the second day of the test. This made them feel very confused. After all, the mission given to their team by the instructor was to kill 10 spirit beasts of level 1 and above. In the army of mystical beasts they encountered yesterday, they basically did not see any spirit beasts. Even if there were, who would have the energy to specifically capture spirit beasts when they were about to lose their lives? Fairy Yellow Crane was a woman with a good temperament. Seeing Che-Rumen's situation, she could not help but feel a trace of sympathy. She raised her hand and took out the only 2 jugs of water in her inner world. She handed them to Che-Rumen and said, "The dozen or so jugs of water I brought in are almost all used up. Take these 2 jugs, but I see that your situation is very bad. If possible, you might as well leave with us and go to a nearby village to replenish your supplies first. There are no villages within 100 kilometers of here. The closest to the lava mountain range is Anka City. Then let's go to Anka City." "No." Che-Rumen bit her lip and shook her head. "Our team's mission is not complete yet. Can you ask your team members to bring us a few jugs of water? You're leaving the lava mountain range anyway, so you should be able to reach Anka City by tonight at the latest." Fairy Yellow Crane looked back at her team members behind her with some difficulty. Some members were cautious and lowered their heads to avoid meeting Fairy Yellow Crane's gaze. That was a clear rejection. Fairy Yellow Crane naturally did not want to force her team members. After all, they had yet to leave the lava mountain range. In this special environment, they were not completely safe. Only 2 members, seeing that Fairy Yellow Crane was in a difficult position, stood up and handed 2 jugs of water to Che-Rumen. Che-Rumen was somewhat dissatisfied. Fairy Yellow Crane's group of more than 10 people only gave them 6 jugs of water. This was too stingy. However, there was nothing she could do. She could only watch as Fairy Yellow Crane's group left. Che-Rumen turned her head and looked at Li Qian, who was breathing heavily. "Li Qian, you promised that you would get first place in this competition." Li Qian's eyes flashed with impatience, who knew that the environment of this lava mountain range would be so harsh. The 2 of them were about to quarrel again. On the other hand, the leveled 13 mystic cultivator who joined last advised with a vulgar smile, "It's not impossible to take first place." Chapter 1670. Che-Rumen turned to look at him. That wretched man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks chuckled again. "Miss Che, do you still remember the mission that the instructor assigned to that team from Arbor?" Che-Rumen was taken aback, but soon after, her expression turned joyous. "You mean, we will find Xiao Mu's team and stealthily follow behind them, waiting for an opportunity to steal the cores of the spirit beasts they killed?" The wretched man stroked his short beard and chuckled mischievously. "This is a low-level method. How many spirit beasts can we steal from them? If they become vigilant, with the strength of their team members, we absolutely won't have a good time in their hands. Then what good idea do you have?" The wretched man took out a talisman shining with a faint blue light from his pocket. "Miss Che, please take a look. This is a yellow-level puppet talisman. Secretly stick it on that little girl, and I guarantee that she'll be obedient for 7 days." The wretched man chuckled mischievously again. Che-Rumen and the others were slightly startled. The leveled 14 mystic cultivator in the team, Zhu Bozong, couldn't help but frown. "Why do you have such a dirty thing like a talisman?" People like talisman masters were loathsome existences no matter where they were. Their minds were too dark and terrifying, and they often hid in the dark to give people a fatal blow. The people they plotted against were still so foolish that they couldn't tell what was going on. The wretched man chuckled. "You don't need to worry about that. In any case, I have my own channels. Just say if everyone wants to do it or not. I'm telling you, this talisman of mine has a great origin. The great master who made the talisman has a much higher cultivation than that little girl surnamed Xiao, so he can definitely make her fall for it without anyone noticing. Ha ha. After speaking, he took out another talisman from his pocket. This is an invisibility talisman. I bought it in the black market by chance. If not for Fairy Huanghe's reminder, I would have forgotten about the invisibility talisman. The wretched man glanced at Li Qian. How about it, young Master Li? Do you want to do it? Do you dare to do it? You want me to put on an invisibility charm, sneak up on Arbor, and use this puppet charm on her? Li Qian immediately understood. Of course, among all of us, your cultivation is the highest, and your movements are the most agile. Young Master Li is the most suitable person to do this. Che Rumen gritted her teeth. Li Qian, let's do it this way. Li Qian couldn't help but frown, but he still couldn't go against Che Rumen's intentions. Will your invisibility talisman be discovered by others? After all, there was a level 3 spirit master in their team. The wretched man's eyes flashed slightly, and he immediately laughed. How is that possible? The invisibility talisman was absolutely invincible for a quarter of an hour. Don't worry, the talisman master who made this talisman is definitely not a level 3 spirit master. You definitely won't be exposed in front of Arbor's team. When he said this, it made people feel uneasy. Li Qian frowned. Unable to resist Che Rumen's pleading gaze, he decided to take the risk and give it a try. Where can we find Arbor's team? The wretched man's eyes flashed, and he laughed mischievously. Too simple. We'll follow the mystic energy from the 4 directions cloud movement, and we'll naturally find that Miss Jiao. Che Rumen was startled, and she couldn't help but ask in surprise, you mean, the advancement movement is caused by her? The wretched man shrugged. Perhaps. Chapter 1671. Following the direction of the surge of mystic energy, Che Rumen and the others indeed found traces of Arbor's group of 5. Che Rumen couldn't help but glance at that vulgar man. Who exactly was this person? Why was he so sure that someone from Arbor's team had advanced? Although it wasn't that loathsome Miss Jiao who had advanced, if someone from Arbor's team had advanced, it meant that their team's strength had improved yet again. This wasn't a good thing that was worth praising. I'll go now. Li Qian lowered his voice and asked. The vulgar man grabbed him. Young Master Li, let's make things clear first. I'll help your team get first place in this competition. After the competition ends, I'll deal with Miss Jiao. Li Qian couldn't help but be startled. What do you mean? We're all in the same boat. How could young Master Li not understand? The vulgar man revealed his black teeth and snickered at Li Qian. Li Qian immediately understood, but he looked down on the vulgar man in front of him. I didn't expect this brother to like this type. That Miss Jiao looked like she hadn't reached marriageable age. She was too young. Although she was very beautiful, her entire person was as cold as a jade carving. Li Qian didn't like this. The vulgar man chuckled. Go. Li Qian stuck the invisibility talisman on himself and felt a strange force enter his body. Immediately, he heard Che Rumen exclaim in a low voice. Li Qian disappeared. Li Qian couldn't help but feel more confident. He left Che Rumen and the others' hiding place and walked briskly towards Arbor's group of 5. Arbor should be guarding Qi Xianxian. Senior brother Mata was sitting at the side, flipping the barbecued meat on the rack. In the team, other than Qi Xianxian who was advancing with her eyes closed, the other 2, Little Fatty and senior brother Duan Muqing, were also meditating with their eyes closed. Li Qian exclaimed in a low voice. The heavens were helping him. He was originally worried that if senior brother Duan Wuqing was awake, things would be difficult. He didn't expect that only senior brother Arbor and senior brother Mata were guarding. If this was the case, the success rate would be higher. As long as he stealthily snuck to Qiao Mu's side and, as the vulgar man said, stuck that puppet curse onto her without anyone noticing, the powerful curse's power would enter her conscious and immediately take control of her movements. At that time, for 7 days, she would have no choice but to obey orders. Of course, the control of Qiao Mu, this little puppet, would most likely still fall into the vulgar man's hands. That was because the wretched man had never told him how to use the puppet charm. Li Qian silently arrived in front of Qiao Mu, but his body suddenly stiffened. This was because he noticed that Miss Qiao had raised her head and was looking at him coldly and mercilessly. Immediately, cold sweat dripped down from his forehead. Why did it feel like this line of sight was substantial and had such penetrating power? Li Qian suddenly picked up a small grain of sand and flicked it at Arbor's feet. The sudden movement of the small gravel caused Mata, who was on the side, to swiftly look around vigilantly. After discovering that there were no suspicious humans or beasts in the surroundings, he raised a piece of spiritual beast meat and said to Qiao Qiao with a chuckle, "Qiao Qiao, this spiritual beast meat is ready to eat. Do you want a piece first? You eat." Arbor glanced coldly at Li Qian, then closed her eyes. Li Qian heaved a sigh of relief. Damn, he thought Qiao Qing saw him. So he was overthinking. Chapter 1672. However, was he really thinking too much? Li Qian thought that he had silently sneaked forward and that Arbor had not noticed him at all. When he reached into his pocket and took out the puppet amulet, he then saw Qiao Mu coldly glare at him. That gaze was clearly her gaze was focused on his face. Shit! She could actually see him. Li Qian cursed the wretched man in his heart. His pupils constricted. He was about to dodge to the side and retreat. Arbor raised her hand and a light screen suddenly covered Li Qian's body. Li Qian was trapped in an inverted transparent cover and his expression changed slightly. Arbor looked at him without a trace of pity in her eyes. There was only a deep chill. The moment the defensive lightning cover opened, hundreds of lightning bolts intertwined towards Li Qian's head. Trapped in the small defensive lightning cover, Li Qian could only cover his head and flee like a rat, constantly dodging the lightning bolts in the defensive lightning cover. At this moment, Che Rumen and the others who were hiding behind the rock were also stunned. What's going on? Che Rumen turned to look at the vulgar man. Didn't you say that no one would discover Li Qian within 15 minutes? What was the situation now? Was Li Qian being controlled by some spirit weapon? Li Qian was a level 1 spirit master and was so flustered in this transparent cover. It could be seen that this spirit weapon was not ordinary. At this moment, Mata, who was worrying about the lack of salt on the barbecued meat, also jumped up from the ground and looked at the figure that appeared in the defensive lightning cover in shock. There was clearly no one there just now. This guy used an invisibility amulet and thought that no one could see him. Arbor said coldly. Idiot. The person who made this invisibility amulet had a higher cultivation level than her, but so what? In order to protect Qi Xianxian, she had been vigilantly using her spiritual eye to scan the surroundings. Under her spiritual eye, this person had nowhere to hide. Moreover, as a yellow-rank Great Talisman Master, even with his eyes closed, he was able to sense the flow of talisman power in the air. Even if her cultivation was inferior to the other parties, talisman energy couldn't deceive people. This person was like a fool, openly walking in front of the Great Talisman Master. Did he think that she couldn't sense the faint trace of talisman energy on his body? You're that rank 1 spirit master, Li Qian. Ma Ta recognized him. When his cultivation exploded earlier, everyone's attention was focused on the few high-level mystic cultivators and spiritualists, so it was very easy to recognize him. When Li Qian realized that he couldn't break free from the defensive thunder barrier, his eyes revealed a trace of fear. What do we do now? Che Rumen nervously looked at the wretched man. The latter rolled his dead fish eyes and snorted contemptuously. You're really too stupid. You've already been caught, but you still don't know how to throw out the talisman. But how did that woman discover Li Qian? Didn't you say? Che Rumen grabbed the wretched man and kept asking, but he gave her an impatient glance. What's the point of saying this now? The wretched man snorted. A level 1 spiritualist who used an invisibility amulet was actually discovered by a level 15 mystic cultivator. This is truly the biggest joke in the world. The wretched man still wanted to ridicule her, but Li Qian, who was trapped inside the defensive lightning cover, finally thought of taking out the puppet talisman that was floating with blue light from his sleeve. The wretched man sneered. Chapter 1673. Humph, idiot. The vulgar man sneered, you should have taken it out earlier. Talismans wouldn't be blocked by spirit weapons. At such a close distance, the talisman would definitely be able to pass through the spirit weapon's cover and directly enter the little girl's consciousness. At that time the vulgar man's eyes were filled with a determined flame. However, in the next second, this person's eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. He stood stiffly beside Che Rumen, as if he had been petrified. He slowly raised his hand. Suddenly, he clutched his chest that a mouthful of blood violently spurted out from his mouth. The vulgar man was greatly alarmed. He secretly cursed. What was this situation? Backlash. Not only was the puppet talisman that he created ineffective against the little girl, it even backfired on him. Ah! How was this possible? At the same time that the vulgar man was shocked, his entire body was on the verge of collapse and he almost fell on his butt. Arbor's ice bead-like eyes were already looking towards his hiding place. The talisman that this guy threw over emitted a special dark aura. Arbor instantly realized that the talisman in Li Qian's hand was puppet talisman. At this time, the vulgar man Tan Fa was also extremely shocked. According to the level of a talisman master, this vulgar man's talent was actually quite high. At least among the disciples of the same sect, his talisman talent was very outstanding. Compared to the martial uncles of the same sect who had been by the Grand Master's side since they were young and could only reach the level of a high-level talisman master after studying for so long, the vulgar man Tan Fa's talent was obviously higher. Talisman masters were different from talisman masters. Compared to the systematic inheritance of talisman masters, the forbidden technique of talisman masters had actually been more or less submerged in the torrent of history. At least, it was impossible to have a systematic and traditional learning method like talisman masters. Talismans were passed down by word of mouth and had to be learned in secret. Because once people discovered that you were a talisman master, you would face the danger of being burned to death. The vulgar man Tan Fa, through this arduous process of learning talismans, finally stepped into the realm of a great yellow-level talisman master with great difficulty. He even believed that compared to talisman masters of the same level, his ability would definitely surpass talisman masters by a large margin. However, Tan Fa did not understand why he would suffer a backlash from the puppet charm. Currently, his conscience was in extreme pain, and his reason was telling him that he had to leave the scene immediately. Otherwise, he might suffer an even more severe blow. That was why he held his head, and under Zhu Bozong and Peng Guang's line of sight, he pressed down on Che Rumen's left shoulder. Suddenly, he raised his left hand, and a teleportation glyph array formed by 24 jade slips appeared under his feet. Rumen! Zhu Bozong and Peng Guang cried out in shock. In the blink of an eye, the wretched man, Tan Fa, grabbed Che-Rumen and disappeared into the transfer glyph array. The last thing they saw was Che-Rumen's deathly pale face. At that moment, Che-Rumen found that he could not resist at all. When this seemingly level, 13 Great Mystic Cultivator pressed down on her left shoulder, she felt a chill run down her spine. In that instant, Che-Rumen felt as though all the strength in her body had been sucked out, and she couldn't even use the slightest bit of profound energy. Che-Rumen looked at her companion in horror, and then disappeared from the teleportation array glyphs. The teleportation glyph array appeared suddenly and disappeared just as quickly. When Xiao Mu shot over like an arrow. Chapter 1674. That wretched man who had secretly attacked her and wanted to use a puppet charm had already pulled the carriage and disappeared without a trace. Another transportation talisman array. A cold glint flashed through Arbor's eyes. The talisman patrician family had never given her the slightest bit of support or warmth, and had always been a hindrance to her. Several times, the people she wanted to deal with had escaped through the transportation talisman array. This caused Arbor's impression of the entire Mu family to worsen. She also had an increasingly bad impression of those so-called relatives of the Mu family that she had never met. Did that wretched man think that he could slip away with the transportation talisman array? A cold glint flashed through Arbor's eyes. Ordinary people naturally couldn't sense talisman energy, but for a great talisman master, it was really too simple to feel the flow of talisman energy. The black silk moved without wind, and Arbor's face was covered in frost. Zhu Bozong only saw that the girl standing in front of him had a talisman glowing with blue light suddenly ignited on the fingertip of her left hand. This was a tracking talisman that could lock onto a target based on talisman energy. As long as this wretched man didn't escape from Shuntian continent, then the tracking talisman would be able to record his position and transmit it to her within 3 days. Arbor coldly swept a glance over Zhu Bozong and Peng Guang. The latter trembled slightly and took a step back together. Zhu Bozong boldly raised his head under the pressure of her gaze. He carefully looked at the little girl and said, "Miss, this time our team leader was in the wrong, but you didn't suffer any harm. Can you release our teammate Li Qian?" Li Qian was still trapped inside the defensive thunder barrier. According to Arbor's style of doing things, how could she let go of someone who had deliberately tried to harm her? Just because they didn't succeed in harming her didn't mean that they were innocent. A cold glint flashed through Arbor's eyes, and she looked at the two with incomparable coldness. "If you don't want to die, then scram immediately. Every injustice had its perpetrator and every debt its debtor. These two people didn't do anything to her, so she was clear about right and wrong. Naturally, she wouldn't retaliate against them. Of course, if these two people still didn't have eyes and wanted to continue making trouble for her, then she naturally wouldn't be polite and let them go." Zhu Bozong's expression changed slightly. "Miss Xiao, please show mercy. We were just tricked by that wretched man. That's why Captain Che was so stubborn and wanted to use this method to deal with you." "What's that person's name?" Arbor asked coldly. "I only know that her name is Tan Fa. "Yes, we only know that his name is Tan Fa. We really don't know anything else about him. You've been together for a day and a night as teammates. You don't know anything. Miss Qiao, every word we said is true. Please verify it." Zhu Bokong said seriously. "Humph." Arbor snorted. A person of unknown origin actually dares to be randomly assigned to his own team. "I'm starting to sympathize with your captain. Why do you think Tan Fa wanted to drag her along?" Hearing this, Zhu Bozong stiffened and stared blankly at the little girl in front of him. Before this, Tan Fa had acted very wretched in front of them, and he had repeatedly emphasized that he wanted to capture this little girl in front of him. But in the end, the two of them didn't know how Tan Fa got injured, and actually dragged their captain away. This really made them very confused. Chapter 1675. The little girl's words now made their hearts in a mess. They, Che Rumen and Li Qian, could be considered as long-term teammates. To tell the truth, in Shuntian continent, where people are unfamiliar, having more friends means more paths, right? Now that they are a small team of 4, they still have some confidence in doing missions. If there are only 2 of them left, what are they going to do? You only have yourself to blame. Arbor coldly glances at the 2 of them, then says, "You can scram now." Zhu Bozong still wants to persuade her, but his companion tugs at his sleeve. "Little girl, where it is possible to make mistakes, one should spare them." Peng Guang says, "Although Li Qian has offended you, but seeing that you are not injured at all, can you be magnanimous and let him go? To people who want to kill me, I will never give them a chance to live." Arbor indifferently throws down these words, and Li Qian's panicked and fearful cries immediately come from inside the defensive thunder barrier. Zhu Bozong and Peng Guang turn around to look. They see Li Qian being cut into pieces by streaks of crisscrossing lightning. He really doesn't have the least bit of room to resist. A level 1 spirit master, in a matter of minutes, completely died in front of them. Zhu Bozong and Peng Guang look at Arbor with a huge change in expression, and a chill rises in their hearts. They only feel that the girl in front of them is very frightening. "You wanted to use the puppet charm to control me, but didn't succeed, doesn't mean you didn't do it. If I was just a weak girl. This time, you have already succeeded. Don't look at me with such innocent eyes. You 2 are very clear in your hearts. You are not innocent at all, right?" After saying that, she expressionlessly sweeps a glance at them, then turns around and leaves. Her fingertips turn slightly, and the defensive thunder barrier is taken back by her. Turning back to meet Mada's eyes, she sees that he doesn't show any displeasure or disapproval, but calmly looks at her and smiles slightly. Mada suddenly raises his hand, holding up the roasted spirit beast meat, and chuckles, "Jojo, I found a bit of salt in little Fatty's pocket with great difficulty. I smeared some on this spirit beast meat. Now it finally has a little taste. Don't you plan to have a taste? I've been roasting it for a long time." Arbor smiled faintly. For some reason, his gloomy mood became somewhat cheerful. Qi Xianxian spent more than half a day meditating to advance her cultivation. It wasn't until evening that she opened her eyes and said to her 4 teammates with a smile, "I skipped the entry stage of level 14 Mystic Cultivator and directly entered the gradual attainment stage. What do you think?" The little fatty was extremely envious. He stared at Qi Xianxian and said, "Hey, you're awesome. In the Lava Mountain range, how the hell did he manage to pass the entrance test? Do you really have to be so lucky?" Qi Xianxian chuckled and said, "I don't believe that your cultivation base didn't improve at all after drinking the spirit tea. From the looks of it, you're only a small step away from breaking through to the spirit realm." "No. Maybe it's only half a step." Hearing that, the little fatty rubbed his nose and chuckled. "Ha, I really can't hide anything from your eyes. That is indeed the case. I see that it's getting late today." Arbor said softly, "Xianxian has advanced for a day, so she should have a good rest now. Let's stay here for now and relax." Chapter 1676. When the sun rises tomorrow, we will enter the second-class area and scatter some medicinal powder at the entrance of the second-class area to attract the spirit beasts. By then, we should be able to complete the mission by tomorrow morning. Okay. No one had any objections and nodded. Little Fatty said excitedly, "Io, we can finally leave this damn lava mountain range." Qi Xianxian looked at him with a faint smile. Is that so? You must know that after passing this test, it will be the day when we can truly live in the lava mountain range. Little Fatty's face stiffened and he cried bitterly, sigh, from now on, we will be living in this furnace every day. It's so hot. Everyone burst out laughing. That night, the entire lava mountain range finally quieted down. Fairy Huanghe's group was rather unlucky. They did not walk out of the lava mountain range. Instead, they looked worriedly at the red fog in the sky and looked at each other worriedly. His teammates, who were sitting in a circle, also looked pale. Their heads drooped, and they seemed to be weak. Fairy, what should we do now? There's fog in the lava mountain range. It has blocked the way. If this continues, we will soon run out of food and water. Everyone had spent a long time in the lava mountain range. The water and food in their inner worlds were almost depleted. After that, they gave 6 bottles of water to Che Rumen and the rest. Fairy Huanghe could not help but feel a little regretful now. If she had known, they would not be able to leave the lava mountain range today. She would not have let her teammates give the water to Che Rumen and the rest. Now, they themselves had fallen into a predicament. But why would there be fog all of a sudden? Fairy Huanghe could not figure it out. I think that if this continues, all of us will collapse due to dehydration. We have to conserve our energy now. It's best if we meet up with the previous teams and see if there is a better way to get out together. Fairy Huanghe nodded slightly. The next day. Early in the morning, Qi Xianxian and the rest saw Arbor brewing tea the moment they opened their eyes. Their eyes lit up at the same time. Arbor really did brew a pot of tea, and judging from the refreshing aroma, it was obvious that it was the spirit tea they drank before. Everyone tacitly agreed that Xiao Mu's spiritual tea in teapot must have been stored inside her storage talisman. They all felt that the spirit tea was very useful and were eagerly eyeing the spirit tea. Unexpectedly, Arbor also cooked vegetable soup and rice for them in the other 2 pots. When Arbor saw that they were awake, he looked back at them and said, I made the soup casually. It might not taste good. However, she put a spirit bamboo shoot in it, which could be considered as making up for her poor culinary skills. Qi Xianxian hugged her and said emotionally, Jojo, you've made us tea, soup, and rice so early in the morning. Yes, it's great that you're here. Arbor didn't think she was that good. Anyway, she woke up early and had nothing to do, so she made them a pot of tea. Moreover, according to the progress of the mission, they should be able to complete the mission of killing the remaining 3 spirit beasts today. Then, they could summon Instructor Wei Wei and bring them back to the academy. Who knew what the future would be like? When the team returned to the academy, they would naturally disband. Since it was fate that brought them together, they should cherish this fate. Chapter 1677. The lava mountain range was simply too hot. She also felt extremely uncomfortable staying here. One had to know that the sacred water was still circulating in her body. The sacred water could suppress the heat in the first place, so her situation should be the best among the 5 of them. Arbor tilted his head to look at them and said to the 4 of them, Do you guys want to drink the spirit tea first or the soup first? Of course it's the spirit tea. Was there a need to ask? The 4 of them simultaneously glanced at the pot of tea. Arbor picked up the teapot and filled the small cups in front of everyone. The 5 of them drank together. After drinking 3 cups of tea in succession, Arbor called everyone over to drink the soup. Other than the vegetable soup, there was also rice. It was early in the morning, and they were just in time to go up the mountain to hunt spirit beasts after eating rice with vegetables and soup. Everyone only felt that this meal was hilarious. After a full meal, they felt that their bodies were emitting an endless amount of energy. This could be said to be the vigor of dragons and ferocity of tigers. Everyone felt that their bodies were brimming with mystic energy. After eating this rice breakfast, Arbor led them to the second category area. He found a place with a wider view and sprinkled medicinal powder. There were indeed many more spirit beasts in the second category area than in the first category area. Not long after, more than 10 blind spirit beasts ran over. Arbor's group only needed to complete the mission of 3 spirit beasts. Even if they killed more spirit beasts, there wouldn't be any rewards. Thus, the 5 of them looked at each other in unison and stealthily hid to the side. They lured the 3 spirit beasts into the first category area and quickly took care of them. Just as Arbor was about to disperse the remaining spirit beasts, a beast roar came from the second category area. This beast roar was different from those low-level spirit beasts from before. That roar was simply earth-shattering and earth-shattering, causing everyone's hearts to tremble. The entire lava mountain range was covered by this beast roar. Instructor Wei Wei, who was resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes and secretly cursed. He had already rushed in the direction of the beast roar. Arbor's group of 5 was ready for battle. They all looked at a pair of bell-sized eyes that peeked out from the stone forest. Its snow-white fur came into view. In less than a second, a snow leopard suddenly rushed out from the stone forest. Qi Xianxian and the other 3 felt their hearts tighten. Their fingers turned slightly pale as they raised their weapons and aimed them at the snow leopard. Arbor looked at the snow leopard, how should he put it? It felt like déjà vu. Déjà vu. Why did it feel like déjà vu? At this moment, Instructor Wei Wei's roar came from behind, disperse. Then, a surge of spiritual energy rushed towards the snow leopard. Everyone saw the spiritual energy in Instructor Wei Wei's hand turn into a spiritual bird. He suddenly charged towards the snow leopard. However, the snow leopard didn't even raise its head. Instead, it stretched out its paw and slapped the spirit bird drawn by Instructor Wei Wei to death. Instructor Wei Wei spat out a mouthful of blood and immediately took a few steps back. He turned his head to look at the 5 dumbfounded people and roared, "What are you all still standing there for? Hurry up and run." The 5 Arbor players felt Teacher Wei Wei was also a little funny. Didn't he say that he wouldn't care if they lived or died? Could it be that he was also a stubborn instructor? Instructor Wei Wei's sudden gentleness towards them and his cold face suddenly changed into an anxious look, which made everyone feel very strange. The 6th watch ended. Chapter 1678. Hurry and leave. I'll hold this place off first. Instructor Wei Wei struggled to prop himself up and stood in front of everyone as he berated anxiously. Just as he was about to attack the snow leopard again, Little Fatty's loud roar suddenly came from behind. Everyone turned to look and saw Little Fatty abruptly dart out from Instructor Wei Wei's side. His chubby body was like a ball as he fiercely smashed towards the snow leopard. Arbor and the other 3 could not help but cover their eyes. Little Fatty rapidly rolled in front of the snow leopard like a wheel, but the latter did not even look at him. It raised its front paw and directly smacked Little Fatty's head hard. Little Fatty was instantly sent flying. That snow leopard understood human nature very well. When it saw Little Fatty fly out, it actually raised its leg and kicked Little Fatty's chubby butt again. Therefore, Little Fatty undoubtedly used a speed faster than when he came and rolled back like he was flying. Furthermore, it was accompanied by a soul-stirring howl. Everyone was instantly extremely embarrassed as they silently glanced at the funny Little Fatty. Their gazes met, and they looked at each other in bewilderment. Little Fatty rolled all the way until he was very far away before he steadied himself. His chubby round face instantly flushed red as he struggled to move his arms and legs, looking like he wanted to immediately roll back. Arbor could not help but reach out and remind him, stand up." Only then did the little fatty suddenly jump up, rolling and crawling as he jumped up from the ground. The snow leopard indifferently glanced at little fatty. That little gaze was simply filled with endless contempt. Even though little fatty was not the person involved, Qi Xianxian still felt her balls hurt when she saw it. Little fatty even flew into a rage out of humiliation as he glared at the snow leopard. This fellow's entire body was full of round meat. Other than being a little dusty, he did not suffer any injuries. The proud snow leopard did not seem to really want to kill him either. Perhaps it was because it looked down on little fatty's cultivation very much. It completely treated little fatty as a fly that flew over and just swatted him away. Little fatty also understood the snow leopard's gaze and was immediately infuriated by its contemptuous gaze. A scholar prefers death to humiliation. He was a dignified peak level 15 mystic cultivator, so why did it seem like he couldn't deal with this leopard? Seeing the little fatty charging forward again without fear of death, Instructor Wei Wei's gaze suddenly changed. Was there a hole in this guy's head? Even the spiritual technique that he, a level 12 great spiritual master, had just thrown out had been instantly swatted back by the snow leopard, all right? Just based on this little fellow's flowery but impractical moves, what could he do to this divine beast in front of him? Stop joking around. Little fatty summoned a double-headed hammer from his conscience and charged towards the snow leopard while carrying his broken hammer. It was as if he was going to fight the divine beast to the death. Instructor Wei Wei suddenly took a step forward, and the figure that was flying towards little fatty was done a flying kick. He immediately stomped on the ground and kicked the little fatty out of the sky. Arbor. Qi Xianxian. Duanmu Qing and Ma Ta were speechless. Little fatty was caught off guard and was kicked in the butt by Instructor Wei Wei, causing him to fly even further away than before. He directly drew a gorgeous parabola in the sky. Thump! He fell headfirst onto the ground, almost falling like a dog chewing on mud. Speaking of which, little fatty's vitality was very tenacious. Chapter 1679. Although his buttocks were in extreme pain, he still jumped up immediately. With a baffled expression, the little fatty looked at Instructor Wei Wei with a strange expression and exclaimed in a high-pitched voice, "Tut, instructor, what are you doing?" "Ah! Who would treat their students like this?" "Ah! Was this a personal tutor? Which school's tutor would do such a thing?" He was just about to fight with the snow leopard. This tutor actually stepped in and kicked his buttocks. It was even more painful than the snow leopard's sudden kick. He was in so much pain that he grimaced. He looked at Instructor Wei Wei with a dumbfounded expression, not knowing what to say. Instructor Wei Wei glanced at him coldly. The next second, he roared, "Get lost!" The five of them looked at each other silently. Qi Xianxian hurriedly pulled Arbor and was about to turn around. Who knew that the snow leopard suddenly roared at them? The roar was so loud that everyone immediately turned around and looked at it warily. The snow leopard looked like it was about to pounce on them and attack. If they were to leave now, they would leave their backs open to the snow leopard. It was probably too late. Instructor Wei Wei's face was solemn. He hurriedly took out a communication jade talisman from his sleeve and wrote a few strokes. Then, his expression changed slightly as he looked at the 5 students and said coldly, "When I say run later, run immediately. Don't look back." Arbor looked at him indifferently and did not say anything. Wei Wei turned his head and saw the snow leopard taking graceful steps and lightly jumping in front of him. It raised its paws and actually walked towards the direction of the 5 students. Wei Wei's expression changed. He reached out to stop it, but the snow leopard turned around and roared at him unhappily. Subsequently, without even looking at him, she tossed him aside and quickly skipped over to Xiao Mu's side. Qi Xianxian panicked when she saw this. His figure flashed, and he abruptly blocked in front of Xiao Mu, blocking her with his hand. A treasure sword with purple light swirling around it was summoned from her conscious. The sword was filled with spirit energy. Qi Xianxian looked at the snow leopard coldly and said, "Stop right there. With him around, this damned leopard would never be able to hurt her Jojo." Roar! The snow leopard growled at Qi Xianxian in dissatisfaction. It tilted its head and its eyes were obviously telling her to get lost. Arbor's eyes lit up as he stared at the snow leopard that was behaving strangely. He gently tugged on Qi Xuanxuan's sleeve. "Don't worry," she said in a low voice. With a flash of her body, she slipped past Qi Xianxian and quickly ran towards the snow leopard. "Don't go over." Duanmu Qing hurriedly stopped him. Instructor Wei Wei was also staring at her with a very disapproving gaze. "What are you doing here?" Arbor did not care about them. At this moment, he was only a few steps away from the snow leopard. A pair of bright and round eyes looked at it, and the corners of her mouth twitched, revealing a rare smile. "Little Snow." The snow leopard rolled on the ground, raised its head, and suddenly lay down on the ground. That appearance was simply comparable to a domestic kitten. The few of them stared at it in shock. This was the same one that killed the instructor's spirit bird with one slap. Was it a super divine beast? Where did this cat come from? Hurry up and take it away. Chapter 1680. Don't you think it's too much for a mighty divine beast to suddenly show such a docile expression on your furry face? Since you're so docile, why did you roar and yell just now? You even made it look like the earth was shaking and the mountains were shaking. Who the hell are you trying to show off to? Everyone watched as Miss Qiao ran forward with a cheer. Under everyone's watchful eyes, she actually jumped onto the snow leopard's broad back and even rolled around on top of it. She even touched the snow leopard's ears while she was at it. Oh my god, that big guy actually didn't look angry at all. It just laid there motionless. Qi Xianxian and little Fatty's eyes widened at the same time. They looked at the snow leopard in disbelief, then looked at Arbor, who was rolling on its back. Jojo. Qi Xianxian couldn't help but cry out. This snow leopard, you. Relative. Pfft, little Fatty almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Whose relative was a leopard? This Qi Xianxian was already incoherent. Duanmu Qing also took a few steps forward. Seeing that Arbor was fine, he sighed in relief and said, "Have you seen it before?" Arbor tilted its head and thought for a while. Then, it sat up and looked at them. "Little Snow used to be my husband's summoned beast." Summoned beast? You're married. Clearly, Duanmu Qing, Ma Ta, and little Fatty's focus was different. Arbor cast a glance at him and nodded. Only then did Mata realize what was going on. He covered his chest with one hand and said in a disappointed tone, "My God. Why is it that all the good girls in this world are already other people's wives?" Little Fatty also blinked his eyes. Qiao, you got married really early. Early? Xiao Mu didn't have any idea. At that time, it was the crown prince who told her that they had been together for 7 to 8 years and that it was time to give them a title. "Yes, I'll definitely get married after I get married. I've known my husband for 7 to 8 years, Miss Qiao said expressionlessly. After 7 to 8 years of being together, they were already an old couple. It was indeed time to give the crown prince a title. Otherwise, it would be too unfair for him, Miss Qiao thought. Everyone was speechless. Why did they feel that this silly girl in front of them seemed to have been tricked by her husband? Cough. Qi Xianxian hurriedly pulled everyone's attention back. Shouldn't the main point be the summoning talisman? Oh, right. Fatty's face lit up with joy. Jojo, you can draw summoning talismans. Arbor nodded. So, this teammate might have more than one beast by his side. Qi Xianxian and the other three shifted their gazes to Instructor Wei Wei's face. Wei Wei's expression was indeed somewhat stiff. He did not expect that the snow leopard in front of him was actually Miss Qiao's old friend. How could he endure this? Why didn't the two of them acknowledge each other earlier? That snow leopard even looked like it was about to attack. Wait, it seemed like this snow leopard had only waved its claws twice. It was their own conjecture that the snow leopard wanted to attack them. Actually, when the snow leopard first swung its claws at him, it used too much force and caused him to spit out blood. After that, it very politely controlled its strength. Even when it slapped little Fatty twice, it did not hurt him. Instructor Wei Wei was somewhat speechless. Training in the Lava Mountain Range, a student could even meet her husband's summoned beast. With such a complicated relationship, Instructor Wei Wei expressed that it was a small world. Chapter 1681. Cough. Mata suddenly smiled and said, "It's great to see you here, Instructor. We've completed the mission of eliminating 10 second-grade spirit beasts. Can you bring us away now?" Instructor Wei Wei's expression changed slightly as he looked at Mata. "Oh. What about the crystal core?" Arbor glanced at him indifferently. "Wait here." She then called Duanmuqing, Mata, and Little Fatty, and went behind the rocks at the back before releasing the 10 spirit beast corpses. The four of them moved the 10 spirit beast corpses in front of the instructor. Wei Wei's expression was complicated as he looked at the students, then at the spirit beast in the middle that had obviously been slaughtered. Instructor Wei Wei frowned slightly as he stared at Arbor with a serious expression. "You're a talisman master, you should have a storage talisman, right?" Qi Xianxian and the others' hearts skipped a beat. They were too complacent just now and actually exposed Jojo's identity as a talisman master in front of Instructor Wei Wei. Arbor nodded indifferently. This matter could not be hidden from the academy at all, and she did not feel that there was anything to hide. Being a talisman master was not a shameful skill. So what if she could draw talismans? That was also a result of her talent. Since that's the case, why didn't you say so from the start? Instructor Wei Wei asked coldly. "I sealed your conscience, but I didn't expect you to take a shortcut. With something like a storage talisman, does it make a difference whether I seal your conscience or not?" "You didn't ask." Wei Wei was stunned and took a while to recall that the little fellow was answering his first question, "Why didn't you say so from the start?" He could not help but laugh in anger. Wasn't it him who said that this student gave him an extremely bad impression when they first met? She had the appearance of a young miss from an aristocratic family. Everyone else had to work hard to reach the peak of a top academy, but what about her? She came riding a phoenix, could she be more daring? Of course, aristocratic families also had the capital of aristocratic families. For example, this child in front of him had the aura of a nouveau riche from head to toe. She casually made an ancient sacred beast, the Bloodfire Phoenix, appear. Now, he realized that as a talisman master, her skill in drawing talismans was very impressive. Such children had a much higher starting point than others, so it was inevitable that they would be arrogant and unsociable. He wasn't deliberately targeting her, but he wanted to suppress her spirit and grind her edges and corners. An academy like theirs might not be able to keep such an arrogant child. Instructor Wei Wei sneered in his heart. His expression was very rigid as he said in a matter-of-fact tone, "Since that's the case, your results are full of exaggeration." "How is it fake?" Just a moment ago, they thought that this teacher who stood up to protect them wasn't that annoying anymore. Who would have thought that in the blink of an eye, he was still so annoying? Qi Xian couldn't help but say angrily, "These 10 spirit beasts were painstakingly killed by us. You sealed our inner worlds. We've only been eating some dry rations for the past 2 days. How can there be water? Even though I'm not a symbol master, I know that a symbol master's storage talisman can store many items." Instructor Wei Wei looked at them coldly and said, "Compared to the others, your team obviously has an advantage in terms of living." Qi Xian frowned. When she thought about the spirit tea, she couldn't help but feel a little guilty. But at this time, how could they shrink back? They couldn't just nod and agree and Instructor Wei Wei would nullify their mission results. You have no basis. Arbor glanced coldly at Instructor Wei Wei. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.